Good morning. It is 6:08, just coming up on 6:09. It is Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. Welcome to Mornings with Bob Marrone on Radio Westchester, the station at the New Rochelle train station. It is 53 degrees here in New Rochelle. It's going to hover around that temperature most of the day. We have a lot of weather coming up. We'll get to you in a minute because the top story this morning and the headline is winter weather, an Arctic blast is coming our way. We will have some rain a little later this morning, followed by snow, and then real cold weather. We'll keep you informed. That's our top story. New York will raise the age to purchase tobacco starting tomorrow. A rat problem amplified by rodent-built tunnels that have their own little city there under Yonkers and under the apartment buildings. And a Yorktown fire destroys the former Gucci estate. Stephen King is retiring. Not that King. The one who's a congressman. All right. So we'll tell you all about that. And it's actually Peter King. Too many books. And something we missed yesterday, and our apologies for this, but New Rochelle's high school football team won the AA championship. And we'll be talking about that too. A lot more coming up, and I will be able to pronounce my words. Stay right there. Welcome once again. It is 6:10. We're going to talk about the weather right now, and it is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. Again, it's 52 right now. It's going to stay more or less around that temperature that is until it drops. Right now, here's the forecast. Patchy light freezing rain is going to fall this morning. The temperatures will get down below freezing. Use caution when traveling in icy spots. For the rest of us, there's going to be a wide range of temperatures to start the day. Again, 30s north and west of the Hudson Valley, or rather north and west of 287, to the upper 40s and low 50s south and east of that line. The showers will gradually transition to periods of wet snow. Temperatures will be dropping through the morning. As of now, it looks more likely that most of the rain and snow will fall with temperatures at or above freezing. That's a good thing. This leads to more wet roads, though, and travel that is not as dangerous until colder air moves in. Regardless, the snow ends towards early this morning or early this afternoon. Expect windy and cold conditions with mostly cloudy skies and icy travel developing. Little snow accumulation, so don't worry too much about that. The worst case is a coating of 1 inch, mainly on colder surfaces. Now tonight, clear and frigid with a strong likelihood of setting new record lows for today. Lows around 18 degrees will feel like the single digits to near 0 degrees with the wind out of the northwest about 30 miles per hour. That kind of breeziness is not comfortable when it's 18 degrees. Multiple layers will be needed and try to limit exposure to the outdoor cold overnight. Previous record lows for Tuesday were 26 degrees back in 1952. We'll keep you informed as we go. As for tomorrow, record cold again, but it will be sunny and breezy and very cold. Highs around 32 degrees. The wind out of the northwest about 20 miles. The gusts 10 to 20 miles an hour. It'll feel like 15 to 25. Tomorrow night, mostly cloudy to partly cloudy. Still very cold, but not as harsh. Thursday, more cloudy, but warming up to about 42. Thursday night, temperatures will be around freezing. And if you're the type that likes to crawl to your weekend, well, mostly sunny, feeling a little bit more comfortable. Highs near 50. That's on Friday. Welcome to the program. As we get more updates on the weather, we will share those with you. Let's get a lot of news this morning. Not as much hyper-local as we usually get, but certainly some regional stuff to talk about. Let's get rolling. Pardon me. The days of 18-year-olds purchasing cigarettes in New York are about to end. A new law will take effect Wednesday, raising the legal age, that's tomorrow, raising the legal age to purchase tobacco products in New York from 18 to 21. The change was approved by lawmakers earlier this year when New York increased its smoking vaping age to 21 in an effort to curb teenage tobacco use. But the law didn't take effect for 120 days in order to give retailers and the general public time to adjust to the new requirement. This in Lohud today. Governor Andrew Cuomo, who signed the law in July after signaling support for the measure back in January, said the new age requirement to purchase cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, by the way, and other tobacco products will help protect an entire generation from the negative effects of smoking. And it comes at a time when several states, including New York, seek to crack down on the flavored e-cigarette. And we all know already why that is so. Oh boy, tough story early in the morning about rats. It's this out of News 12. Renters at one Yonkers apartment building say trash thrown onto the streets brings dozens of rats into their homes. No kidding. Who's throwing trash onto the streets? And why would they do that? Why? It makes no sense, but they do. Right before News 12 cameras arrived, and when they did this story, good for them, a mountain of trash was bagged and taken from inside an alleyway on Hawthorne Avenue. But the people that live in the surrounding buildings say as soon as it gets dark, the garbage becomes a feast for the little critters. Residents at 288 and 290 Hawthorne Avenue say the trash problem isn't a new one. They pointed out road-and-built tunnels connecting the buildings, which they say had not been professionally patched. So they stuck rocks in the holes and said, instead, families say they've begged their landlord to put trash cans outside their buildings for years, but to no avail. What about the law? What happens? You know, what little I know about this, the county, under all administrations, has been very reluctant to prosecute landlords and other homeowners for violations. Very, very reluctant. One day we'll have to, as we build this radio station, we'll have to get someone to stick their nose into the administrative processes in the courts that govern that sort of thing. This out of Yorktown and out of Lohud this morning. Firefighters spent several hours yesterday morning battling flames that ravaged a home in the Yorktown Heights property that was once owned by fashion designer Paolo Gucci. The fire on Baptist Church Road was reported by a passerby about 6 o'clock, right when we go on here. The homeowner, Joseph Tomlinson, said no one was home at the time. He had been in Virginia, where he splits his time. Now, there are no hydrants near the property, so fire departments had trucks rushing in and out to bring water from the hydrants. Thompson said he was thankful no one was hurt, but the property's pretty much gone. This story, and our apologies, we just didn't see it yesterday despite our efforts. This out of Lohud, and we want to shout out to the New Rochelle football team. In fact, there's one Jesse Parsons who plays there. This was a clear, by the way, what they're saying about him is people would be wise not to doubt this young man, Jesse Parsons. He was their major domo, the chief best player on the team. He directed toward a thirsty... I misread this. Anyway, they won the Class AA championship for the first time in 11 years. Again, New Rochelle High School for the first time in 11 years. Wow. Anyway, he was a track star, this young man that we're talking about, Jesse Parsons, and he outran Carmel for a school record 327 yards and scored 5 touchdowns as unbeaten New Rochelle secured its 5th straight Section 1 title at Mayapaug High School. Good for him and good for the New Rochelle football team. This next story out of News 12 and Connecticut. Connecticut police say they found drugs and a gun in a car during a traffic stop this past Friday. Leon Spady of New Rochelle was pulled over at I-84 in Danbury for distracted driving. Police say the weapon they found was reported stolen in Atlanta. Spady is facing several weapons charges. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to pull this one aside and see if this guy, we're going to track it. And we did this at random. We just saw it, just got the brilliant idea. We're going to track this story and see if this guy does any time for gun possession. Because you know what? And I'm going to assume, we don't know, maybe this is a guy who's a businessman who bought a gun and was dumb to do it. But if that's the case, we're going to follow that too. But here's my wager. If you, a law-abiding citizen, get caught with a gun not properly registered and not properly approved for travel and or concealment, you're going to do time. You're going to be in a lot of trouble. But if you regularly carry a gun, if you regularly get arrested, it's not a big deal. We're going to track this one. So, you know the one we're going to track, and we'll do our homework. Leon Spady of New Rochelle. We'll find out what happens to Mr. Spady. Are you listening, judges? All righty. This out of Albion. What happened, as well as what could have happened at the middle school, is understandable. The talk of the Western New York Village rumor is filling in where limited facts end, and that's what people do. As you know, a judge will determine the conditions of their continued release. These are the young men, of course, that were plotting a deadly attack on the school in Albion. It was in the press all this past weekend. For now, though, Superintendent Michael Bonwell has a stack of messages to return, including from the New York Times, CNN, and ABC. And he's just not answering it. Albion is a town and village of less than 6,000 people, about 45 minutes west of Rochester. The school district numbers almost 2,000 students, but no answers are coming forward. And he should pick up a couple of old newspapers, see what happened here in New Rochelle, and it might help him stay out of hot water. Well, the president yesterday was here in New York City, and he gave the remarks before the start of the Veterans Day Parade, and things went pretty well. He kicked it off by honoring the warriors, as he called them, who took down the ISIS boss Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, along with others who risked their lives to defend the United States in foreign wars. The president said, and I quote, "Our veterans risked everything for us. Now it is our duty to serve and protect them every day of our lives." Trump, speaking on stage behind bulletproof plexiglass, told an audience of about 200 people during the parade's opening ceremony. Trump, who originally changed his official residence from New York City to Palm Beach, said it was an honor to come back to New York City and to be the first president ever to attend America's parade. And good for him that he did that. Let's put politics aside today. Thank you, President Trump. But he did get some bad news as well yesterday. The president did this out of the Associated Press. A federal judge on Monday dismissed President Trump's lawsuit against New York officials that was aimed at preventing the release of his tax returns. Judge Carl Nichols handed down a 19-page ruling finding the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. does not have jurisdiction to hear the case. Trump sued New York's Attorney General, Tax Commissioner, and the House and Ways and Means Committee in July, seeking an injunction to block the application of a New York state law known as the Trust Act that could allow the Democratic-controlled House to obtain his tax returns. As is well known now, President Trump has refused to release his tax returns since he was a presidential candidate and is the only modern president who hasn't made that financial information public. And to be fair, there's no law that says he had to. It was a tradition, not a law, but it looks like he will soon be compelled to follow suit. It is 6:22. Speaking of presidents, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter was admitted to a hospital on Monday evening for a surgery to relieve pressure on his brain. This caused by bleeding due to his recent falls, and reported in News 12 today and also via the Associated Press. The procedure is scheduled for this morning at Emory University Hospital. Carter has fallen at least 3 times this year, and the first incident in the spring required hip replacement surgery. He traveled to Nashville and helped build a Habitat for Humanity home after getting 14 stitches, fell again. Anyway, the president, please, should get some sort of a cane or something and be more careful. He's 95 years old. He survived cancer. He's obviously brave and as hardy as one could be at that age, but take care of yourself, Mr. President. Good news out of Metland, and there's not always a lot of good news out of Metland, but Pete Alonso of the New York Mets has been selected the National League Rookie of the Year. Alonso led the majors with 53 home runs. This is head-scratching. 53 home runs for a rookie. How do they not know this? And earned 29 of 30 first-place votes in the balloting by the Baseball Writers Association of America. This came out last night. Houston Astros designated hitter Yordan Alvarez took all 30 first-place votes in the American League, becoming the 24th unanimous pick. Okay, forgive me. I don't think a designated hitter, I guess Rookie of the Year, but hope he never gets MVP. It's a good thing. It's a fill-in job. It's nice. You should be paid well. You hit home runs. You're either going to be a pitcher or an everyday player. Alonso's home run total was one better than Yankees star Aaron Judge's rookie record of 2017. Polar Bear Pete, I didn't know he was called that. Did you? I didn't know he was called that. Became the face of baseball in Flushing, beloved for his power, personality, and philanthropy. He gifted $100,000 from his All-Star Home Run Derby to charities supporting injured soldiers and 9/11 workers. All right, before we get into some of the national stories, there is a very important local story. I called him Stephen King. Sue me, shoot me, yell at me. I was thinking about watching the movie Pet Sematary the other night. I don't know why, but anyway, still Shining, my favorite. But this is about Representative, 28-year veteran GOP Representative Peter King. He declares he won't seek re-election. Yet another Republican congressman or woman won't seek re-election. The 14-term Republican leader of New York's congressional delegation, this is how it's written in the Post, who is an outspoken advocate for 9/11 compensation and Hurricane Sandy reconstruction, said he won't be running again in 2020. His decision makes him the 20th GOP lawmaker to opt against seeking re-election since President Trump was elected, and sets the stage for a likely highly competitive contest to represent the 2nd District on Long Island next fall. Now, this is a quote from the congressman. Quote, "The prime reason for my decision was that after 28 years of spending 4 days a week in Washington, it is time to end the weekly commute and be home in Seaford," the 75-year-old King said in his statement. I thought he was younger than that. Good for him. Good shape. The seasoned GOP lawmaker confessed that punting on a possible 15th term, quote, was not an easy decision, quote, but cited a desire to spend more time with his wife and their 2 children. Wow. King has represented Nassau and Suffolk since George H.W. Bush was in the job. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, a number of issues, and this is a shocker, particularly in light of what's coming tomorrow. And for those of you who aren't aware, tomorrow the impeachment inquiry heads for live TV. Shades of Watergate. When we come back, you're listening to Radio Westchester. Our programs today are supported by the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, a top-rated campus of senior care. Visit UHGC.com. Aging Issues Management. Their 3rd show will take place today. We will be talking with Joe Soroselli, the president and principal of Aging Issues Management, at 8:50 about his new program. The law firm of Pena and Khan, Plug-in Virtual Reality, and Dominic's Cigars. They are also sponsors of our Jake's Picks of the Week. We will be right back with the weather, an update on the weather. That wasn't a very long break, right? Welcome back. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. We are live at the new Rochelle radio station. We are the station at the station on this Tuesday, the 12th of November, 2019. It is 52 degrees. Not going to get any warmer than that today. And here is the weather. It's 52 and overcast, hanging around, maybe getting up to 53 if you're lucky. We have 70%. That's official. It is going to rain. And we're talking about temperatures hovering around the freezing mark. The rain will turn to snow. And this is what's going to happen between about 7 or 8 o'clock this morning and noontime. Now, there might be some snow sticking, but they doubt it because the temperatures are going to hover around there and they get maybe a touch warmer. But here's the problem. The temperature will drop this afternoon and continue to drop clear and frigid tonight with a strong likelihood of setting a new record low for today and even tomorrow. Lows around 18 degrees, and it will feel like single digits to near zero with the wind factor. It's wind out of the northwest, 15 to 30 miles an hour. Multiple layers will be needed when you go out in that. And get some gloves. If you didn't get the gloves out yet, get them out now and try to limit exposure to the outdoor cold overnight. Now, previous record lows for this day go back to 1952. It was 26 degrees. And for tomorrow, 1986, it was 23 degrees. So tomorrow, and looking at tomorrow, record cold. That's the official announcement. Sunny, breezy, and very cold. Highs around 32. The wind out of the northwest, 20 miles an hour. Will feel like 15 to 25 degrees. Tomorrow night, partly to mostly cloudy. Still very cold, but not as harsh as Tuesday night. Lows around 24 with lighter wind. Mostly cloudy on Friday. I'm sorry, mostly cloudy on Thursday, not as cold. Highs around 42. It'll be a little less challenging. All righty, as we said, tomorrow, in 1973, and that's where we go back, and this out of the Associated Press today, tens of millions of Americans turned into what Variety called the hottest daytime soap opera. And for those of us who were alive at that time, and many of our listeners, in fact, probably most of them were, given our baby boomer demographic, but we've been getting younger from what we've been looking at with our numbers coming in. Watergate turned many of us who weren't political wonks into wonks. It was interesting. It was compelling. But more importantly, it was coming off the heels of where we knew very little then. There was no tweeting. We didn't have 24-hour cable. And we knew very little about what went on behind the scenes. And even that, just that was intriguing. The things the president said. John Dean's testimony still resonates with people today. One line, there's a cancer on the presidency. It's growing geometrically, and it's likely to capture you, Mr. President. And on he went. And not one thing this guy ever said was disproved. Very interesting, him, that testimony. And then, of course, when they found out about the recordings in the White House, and for the first time, we heard a president. And that wasn't even as interesting. Well, it was interesting because of the wrongdoing that was uncovered. What was more interesting was the dynamic of the principals in the White House, the chief of staff, the head of communications, the different lawyers, the John Deans, the G. Gordon Liddy's, and so forth. Interesting stuff. Of course, since then, we've seen books with all various presidents, most notably John F. Kennedy, and then LBJ, about what went on behind the scenes. Now, in this case, it's going to be a little different because it's going to focus almost singularly, these hearings, on what went on in the Ukraine and what did not. And I think most people who haven't heard the testimony or seen it kind of realize that there was a quid pro quo. I don't think there's any denying that. I think there also, though, is probably, in the absence of something more, a sense that it's not likely that the president will be removed from office. It will actually serve in a way as a voice box for people to make their own judgments come election day. And that's probably as it should be, so long as the president is treated fairly. Now, fairly does not mean the suppression of what happened. It simply means that the facts get out there as best as we know them. Now, having said that, a piece last night jumped off the computer at us as we were doing show prep for today. And this is about Mr. Napolitano, the judge, the court judge, the former Supreme Court judge and a state Supreme Court judge, who is a regular on Fox now for over 20 years. He's now almost a pariah. He joined Fox in 1998, has emerged as one of Donald Trump's bluntest critics on a network where the president expects to hear encouragement. And this piece out of AOL, actually, out of the Associated Press. Napolitano has defended an impeachment inquiry that many Trump supporters call unfair. And I happen to agree with him. I'll put that stake out there, noting it follows rules written by Republicans. He said the White House counsel's arguments against the process were, quote, profoundly misguided, unquote, and described Trump's since withdrawn proposal to host a summit of world leaders at his Miami resort as a constitutional violation. Of course, he's talking about the emoluments clause there. Quote, about as direct and profound as one could create, unquote, he says. He has questioned how seriously Trump takes his oath of office and said he governs, and this is Napolitano, like a mafia don. The commentator's assertion that Robert Mueller had found 10 instances of obstruction of justice that could have resulted in criminal indictment if Trump hadn't been president earned him an angry tweet from the White House. Said Tim Grand, director of media analysis at the Conservative Media Research Center. He said, quote, he's beginning to sound like Judge Shepard Smith. It was Smith, the since departed Fox News anchor who occasionally fact-checked claims by Fox opinion hosts, who came to Napolitano's defense after Genova's remark on September 24th. Smith called the attack repugnant. Now, Napolitano has gone on to say, quote, it just sort of rolls off my back. I realize that when you're in this business, and I'm on the opinion side, not the news side, that is going to ruffle some feathers. I have never taken it personally. Now, he suspects his opinions have cost him airtime on Fox. And some of the people that he, it's kind of interesting, the people that he most fights with or disagrees with, the primetime host, Sean Hannity, who he's openly biased. At least I got to give him that. Laura Ingraham, who is just totally a cartoon of a figure, and Tucker Carlson, who's gone beyond the cartoon. Now, look, if it were the other way around and there was a Democrat in the dock, I'm sure the press would be, or at least the people defending him would be equally as obnoxious. And that really is a problem, though, that I don't have a problem with per se, Fox News defending the president, because it adds a certain balance and equality to the news. So you have people on the right and people on the left, and you have the huge center, even though both sides try to say, no, the center hates us. Having said that, what we have is the loss of self-respect by these news outlets. It's okay to say you think that the thing is unfair. But when you put stories out there that are blatantly false, that challenge the Constitution, that challenge the very laws that we live in, that question that black is white or the world is flat, it really is troubling. Okay, let's move on. Now, this isn't so much about Trump as an issue of what we do with the Kurds. Now, if you remember after Vietnam, when Vietnam fell, we had helicopters picking up all kinds of South Vietnamese refugees. We took them here. We gave them safe haven. Well, we're not doing that for the Kurds. And this was a piece, I guess, in the Star Ledger this week. Policymakers and senior military officials and decent Americans are appalled that we've broken our promises. Everybody knows that. The president, and I wouldn't even get into the quality of the decision. They make tough decisions all the time. This was one a lot of people didn't agree with, including the military, but he did what he did. And that's secondary, though. But the door has been closed on these people. We've only let in 51 Iraqi interpreters last year, down from 5,100 in 2016. And the harshest cap on refugees is being placed. 16 House Republicans have signed a letter of protest. To their credit, another U.S. Representative Michael Watts of Florida, a former Green Beret, introduced a bill to set aside 4,000 visas a year for the Syrians who risked their lives for us. One American officer was so grateful to the Iraqi interpreter he fought with, he wanted to take him into his family home in Dallas. Another offered a job. He passed all the security checks but was still blocked by Trump policies, even after multiple assassination attempts. When we evacuated Saigon, again, the piece goes on, we airlifted tens of thousands. We need to do more. But there's really something here, I think, and I'm hopeful, actually, that the president will think this through. One of the things that's appealing about this president to a lot of people is that some of his ethics are street ethics, and the best of street ethics in some ways. You don't rat on your boss, you're loyal, all those kinds of things. But you repay loyalty. That is another part of that. And to the extent that most of the Kurds, they don't want to come here. They have their homeland. They're willing to fight and die for it. And their homeland, of course, is made up strung across 4 different other countries, because we lied, and that is the Allies lied to them after World War I, and again after World War II, and again after the Iraq War. I'm not going to repeat that whole sordid set of affairs. But nonetheless, they're perfectly willing to take care of themselves. But there are individuals who worked very closely with us as interpreters, who worked with us as spies. They worked with us in the field, and they need to get out of there. And I would appeal to the president in this case to acquire that street ethic as well. Someone fought side by side for you and now is in danger, maybe even assassination. Let's get our act together and let these people in the country and give them asylum. It shouldn't be a question. Similarly, there were so many stories yesterday, we didn't even bother preparing any of them. It has to do with there aren't enough nurses in our veterans' homes. Now, yesterday, everybody celebrated Veterans Day. We had a big affair over here across from the Armory. The president, thankfully, came to New York, the first ever to give a speech for veterans on Veterans Day at the parade, that is, of course. All over the city and the country, there were dedications. Now everybody goes back to work today, and the most important thing is to get money. And we spend money on all kinds of things. In fact, don't build a wall then. I didn't even mention the wall, but don't build a wall. Don't give license, but we'll be happy if it don't give licenses to the immigrants if you don't want to. Take that money, print money, and get more nurses and improve the quality of care in our nursing homes for veterans. And if you get a chance, really, folks, try and stop by one of these places. Some are well run, others not. Some, the people mail it in. Some people who work in these places, and I've been there a lot because a dear friend of mine, one of my best friends, is in residence in one of these places. And you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. There are people that shouldn't even be working in these places because they have no regard for the veterans that they're serving, and others who have wings like angels. We need to manage this well. We've got to stop, even though we say we care about our veterans and we say thank you when they walk down the street, what we need to do is say thank you in the homes, say thank you in the residence facilities, say thank you in the hospitals by anteing up public money. I mean, there are wonderful organizations, and we have them on this show, the Warriors Fund, and all my colleagues in radio and TV do that. That's not enough either. We need to raise the consciousness for veterans. That is more important. And I don't care what your politics is. In fact, you can't exercise your politics. You can be AOC. You can be President Trump. You could be Representative Jim Jordan. You could be Bernie Sanders. The fact that we can have these arguments, and even the stuff that's so distasteful now, have a president fighting the Congress, have the Congress fighting the president, having them yell back and forth, the press in the middle of it, that's democracy. And one of the things that pays for it has been the blood and the injury and the indignities that are now being experienced by many, many veterans. So please, enough. That's my speech for today. We need literally to put our money where our mouth is. The mouth of Veterans Day was nice. Now we need to do something for these people. And if you want to work for these people, you want to take a job as a nurse or a caretaker in a veterans facility, it better be almost quasi-religious or you don't belong there. That's my minor league take. Okay, we have a very interesting case going before the Supreme Court. They're in session, you know, and we're not going to go to abortion or all that. This is a much more pedestrian issue, but nonetheless an important one that we tend to minimize. Now get this. All of us remember 6 years ago when Bridget Ann Kelly and Bill Marrone, the former Christie administration official convicted in the infamous scheme of political retribution that became known as Bridgegate. I mean, here's pretty much what happened. I'll paraphrase the piece, but you all remember it. The people running Christie's campaign, with an eye towards maybe his running for president, they wanted to demonstrate that Christie, and he was popular at the time, that Christie had bipartisan support, and so they were recruiting and getting, for the most part, endorsements. He was a Republican, of course, Governor Christie, getting endorsements from Democrats. And the mayor of Fort Lee at the time refused to give the endorsement. So one of the people who has been convicted of this crime, of doing this act of ordering parts of the bridge tolls things closed, actually had an email, the smoking gun, that got 3 people. One didn't go to jail because he ratted on the other 2. But Bridget Ann Kelly and Bill Marrone did. And it says, after he wouldn't support them, time to cause some traffic problems in Fort Lee. At any rate, here's what they're asserting. This is incredible, and you'll see me wiggling in my chair because I can't handle it. It's gotten to the Supreme Court because the judge found them guilty, the court found them guilty, the appeals court found them guilty, every judge and jury in New Jersey found them guilty. Now, again, these are people in high places, right? So you know it's going to get to the Supreme Court. And so it has. And here's what they're asserting. They're asserting that it's not a crime because what they did was political retribution, and that political actions, I mean, there's some precedent for it, but not when it goes this far. Political actions are not criminal, and that political retribution is common in the political process. All right, now here's the deal, and I'm going to make this very personal. So you get the phone call from the doctor, and the doctor tells you that your mother or your father has got a couple of hours to live. Please come to the hospital. And you live, down on exit 8, down in New Jersey, or you live in Woodbridge, or you live near Princeton, or any one of the other places, Kenilworth. And God, you want to see your mom before she dies. And so you get in your car, and you head north with the best of intentions. But now you're stuck in traffic. And you're stuck in traffic for an hour, and you're stuck in traffic for 2 hours, and you're stuck in traffic for 2.5 or 3 hours because of someone's political retribution, and mom dies before you get there. Or you haven't had a job for a year or two. And all these anecdotes, you don't know what's in those cars. Today, if you're on your way driving to work and you have me on Bluetooth, I want you to look in the other car to your right, or look in the other car to your left, or look to the car in front of you and wonder who's in there, who's on their way to work, who's trying to support a family, who can't afford to be late one more time and they keep being late because the kids are sick. Or it's some guy in his car who finally, after not working for 5 or 6 or 10 years, finally has an interview for a job that matters. Or maybe there's a man and a woman in the car to your left who themselves has a court appointment in New York City. Maybe they have a DUI, they're ashamed of, and they got to go to court today. Well, they're going to be late. All right. Or you've got some other poor soul who, for whatever reason, needs to get where they're going. Maybe they have a promise. Maybe they need to pay a bill. Or maybe they just want to go to work. Well, the Supreme Court, if they let these people off the hook, that is a slippery slope. So what it says is that if it's political, it's okay. If I did it, if I shoot someone in the head, I guess, but it was done for political reasons, it's okay. That is the essence of the suit. I mean, I have it right here. The scheme at the world's busiest bridge was orchestrated by David Wildstein, a Port Authority political appointee who pleaded guilty and became a prosecutorial witness against Marrone and Kelly, both found guilty. Kelly and Marrone sought to reverse their conviction before the Court of Appeals. That's the U.S. They went all that high. But a 3-judge panel said, get out of here. No legitimate justification in June, and why they agreed to even hear it amazes me. But in June, the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. At issue, does an official, quote, defraud the government, unquote, of its property by advancing a public policy reason for an official decision that is not the real reason for making the decision? In other words, was it fraud for Kelly and Marrone to conceal the real reason why the lanes at the George Washington Bridge were shut down to motorists? In briefs filed with the High Court, attorneys for Kelly argued that the prosecution criminalized what they call routine political behavior. So it's routine political behavior to shut the bridge and deprive people of their livelihood. You pieces of garbage. You creeps. You low class, because you're in politics, think you're entitled. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, whoever you are. That's why Silver is still running around the streets of the Lower East Side. Did you know that? He's still not in jail yet. Do you think you would be walking the streets? The Supreme Court, I don't know why they decided to take this case. I guess there are nuances of the law. But this is political behavior. So the next time, and you know what? If you think this is bunk, I don't want this to happen to you. But the next time you get that phone call in the middle of the night, or you're on your way to the city to see your dying relative, or see somebody you haven't seen in a while, or pick a dear friend up from the airport, or just try and show up and earn a living, and some political low caste under a rock piece of scum does something like that, Supreme Court, don't let him off the hook. Yes, I feel very passionate about this. Think about it. You want to do your politics. You want to play dirty. They're playing dirty in Washington right now. All sides are. I get it. It's part of the crummier part, the more seamier part of our political system. But don't hurt the everyday Joe out there trying to make a living or see a loved one. Don't do it. I hope they go to jail, and I hope they have a very rough time. All righty, at 6:49, we're going to take a break. We have other stuff to talk about. I should take a stress pill after doing that story. I can't. Oh, it's just regular political behavior. The phones are open, 914-222-3140. When you think I'm crazy, you challenge me. I want to see someone win this argument that I've laid out there. I rarely tell you that I feel 100% confident in an argument because I like to keep an open mind. Oh, it's not open now. We'll be right back. We have returned. That felt good to throw those people under the bus. Please, Supreme Court, please do send them to jail. You're listening to Radio Westchester. We are the station at the New Rochelle train station. Our lights are on. People are going on their way to the train. It's still early. It's 6:51. And I'm looking at the traffic cam right now. Things are looking pretty good as well, so we like that. Let's see what's coming up today. We have a very busy show. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Trump situation. We're also going to talk about Mr. Bloomberg coming up in a bit. A little more sports. Mike Edelman's in today at 7:20, and Bob Cox. Now, yesterday, and this happens on holidays, and some of you called and texted me about it, and we even had a listener who was looking forward to Mr. Cox at 9 o'clock, and when it didn't happen. Where's Bob Cox? Well, that's because I messed up. And it happens on Mondays. My apologies. It was my mix-up. Now, Bob will be with us today at 7:35 through 8, but starting next week, he will be the regular fixture every Monday at 9 o'clock. So you want to write it down, make that appointment. We call it a radio appointment. He will appear each Monday, but we have him for 30 minutes today. And today, a new guest, yet another in our lineup of local journalists, Delphine Husler. I never can pronounce his name right. He actually ran for county executive once. He runs a website called The Yonkers Insider and sticks his nose into local politics there. We've reached out to a man by the name of Brian Harrod who does research on many different stories in the county. And we will continue our efforts to get all of these hyper-local journalists and bloggers and local newspaper people who grind it out every day, okay, to bring you the real local news. That's one of the reasons we're here. So Del will be with us today. We've got Vince back today, Vince Russo, because we wanted to see what happened when he went back to church, how his speech in his effort to find God, and that I say seriously, not tongue-in-cheek, because he's a good friend, and we kidded him about it. But nonetheless, Joe Suricelli will be with us at 8:50. Joe, one of our sponsors, Aging Issues Management, but he also is one of the producers of one of our new shows called Aging Issues Radio. You'll really want to listen to this. One of the things that Joe does, and he does it really well, is he breaks down your later years. Perhaps you're 55 or 60 and you're headed towards retirement. He calls them the go-go years, where you're still doing a lot of different things. What should your profile be? How should you be living? What kind of house? Do you want to stay at home? Do you want to be in some sort of a senior facility when you become 65? How are you going to, what will your revenue be? And then a little later on, when you're still in good shape, but you've stopped working, not your go-go years, but your, let's say, traveling around years, and then, of course, in the subsequent, if you will, passages of life. Does that very well, knows how to deal with Medicare, Medicaid, insurances and stuff. One of the best in the business. We'll be talking with Joe about 8:50 about what he will be talking about today. 9 o'clock, we'll be talking about Jack Breslin, and we will be talking about how the press will likely handle this TV, if you will, bonanza. For those of us who like politics, although where it's a little different now, and that TV bonanza, I'm sorry, about the Trump hearings, the impeachment hearings, and I'll tell you why. When this all happened with President Nixon back in '72, it was also very new to me, and I had a full-time job, and I'd be up till 2 in the morning watching the hearings, and then I would get the Times every day and read every line. I have this obsession. My grandson says I have Asperger's, a little bastard. But anyway, I have to read every line and understand what fits, what doesn't fit. It really drives a lot of what I say on this program, so I liked reading about it. But what's been so great about the 24 hours news cycles is I don't expect to hear myself now anything at the hearings that I haven't already read, because I have to do it or I couldn't show up here. You'd see how stupid I really was if I wasn't overly prepared. So it won't be quite as much fun to watch the hearings, and I won't have to watch every minute of them. I already know what's there. Pretty much I've read all the transcripts. It's what you pay me to do. Well, you don't pay me, but you know the deal. So, but we'll be asking Jack Breslin about how that gets covered, how much we likely already know to my own point, and how much we're likely to gain from that. Now, the phones are open if you want to join this conversation, 914-222-3141, 222-3141. That's what's coming up today. Now, where's this other piece? Yes. Now, something that there hasn't been enough news about it, and that's only because I think what happens with the president always tweeting, and I have an opinion on that I'm going to get to, always tweeting and always going right after people and always saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. People don't really listen when something has heft. And this story has heft. Now, you have heard that William Barr has assigned an individual, a prosecutor, U.S. Attorney John Durham from Connecticut, to look into the manner in which the investigation into the Russians hacking our election, and not so much that part of it, but the part that involved the president's people and the president's minions and whether or not there was collusion, quote unquote, although that evolved. I don't know that anyone actually said that, but it became the issue. Well, a lot of people who call this program will say, what about the FIFA warrant? What about, were they spying on the president? Was it politically motivated? Was it ordered by, for example, President Obama? Was it ordered by the then Attorney General? Did the CIA or the FBI go rogue? Did Comey go rogue? Et cetera, et cetera. Well, again, that gets yelled so much that people say, oh, it's just the president. But no, let me tell you what's here. Now, this is the individual, John Durham, and he's the guy that's working for Barr. He's the Connecticut U.S. Attorney whose reputation is pristine, more pristine, I dare say, if it's possible, than Mueller's. And I understand he actually has more testicular abilities than Mueller, sorry, Mr. Mueller, I know you served our country well, but you punked out this time. Anyway, but this guy is neither for or against, and everyone, according to the Associated Press people, agree. The man leading the inquiry into the origins of the Russian probe is no stranger to politically sensitive investigations. In his 41-year career as a prosecutor, John Durham, the U.S. Attorney for Connecticut, has led investigators into the FBI's cozy relationships with Boston mobsters, such as James Whitey Bulger, and the CIA's use of tough interrogation techniques on terrorism suspects. So he's played all ends of this. Former colleagues and defense lawyers who have squared off against him say he is unlikely to be concerned about any fallout from his findings during this new assignment. Quote, Whomever put him in charge, I hope they didn't expect him to be a yes man and follow the script, because he will follow the evidence relentlessly and call it as he sees fit, said Hugh Keefe, a defense attorney in New Haven. Now, why this is good is if the Democrats are worried about it, well, they shouldn't be, because they feel, and that for the most part, this whole investigation was done in the up and up. There'll be nothing to be concerned about. But if somebody did do things, if individuals did things that were inappropriate, they should be called on the carpet. If it was political, they should be called on the carpet. Although based on what the Supreme Court does today, maybe it'll be okay because it was political, or rather what they do with the case from New Jersey. But so that, and I think people who are supporters of the president, they have a right to know that that thing goes through. Attorney General William Barr picked Durham in May to examine what led the U.S. to open a counterintelligence investigation of President Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. That investigation led to a special counsel, that is Robert Mueller, his probe of Russian interference in the election. I'll get to Mueller and why I feel as I do about Mr. Mueller in a moment. Recently it was disclosed that Durham's administrative review has become a criminal inquiry. Now, usually there's some smoke for them to do that. So that's interesting, but no one knows why. What is unusual is no one has said what that thing is. But nonetheless, again, he's looking into whether the surveillance and intelligence gathering methods used during the counterintelligence investigation, whether they were legal and appropriate. Pardon me. But the parameters of his investigation have never been defined for the public, making it unclear what problems or misconduct from the early days of the Russian probe he is searching for. Now, the probe, Mr. Mueller, a couple of odd things, a couple of stakes in the ground here. This is good and healthy because it answers the questions for those who want that stuff looked into, who question the FISA warrants and everything else. This needs to be done, and good that it's a guy that everyone trusts. But here's my gut problem with all this. That's what they said about Mueller, and the president attacked him. Comey first helped the president by throwing Hillary Clinton under the bus. She never recovered. He's got an X on him. The former Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, he was one of the president's biggest supporters. He has an X on him. Cohen was the president's fixer. He has an X on him. So if he doesn't find anything, what will the White House say about him? And that's fair criticism from me, really, in my own view. I'm judging myself. Yes, I am. But I hope that doesn't. I hope they just accept what this guy does, and we move on. And if Democrats or people in the deep state, oh good God, people in the deep state did anything, I hope that they find it out. Now regarding Mueller, look, I know he's a hockey player, so that makes him a good guy. I know he had a great reputation, but he tried to do something, probably because of the way he internalized. Because a lot of people ask me, why do I have such a problem with Mueller? And we need to go back a little bit. Every time history has changed, when in the creation of this republic, something didn't work so egregiously. This is why Jefferson used to say a little revolution is a good thing from time to time. When things have become so bad, when things have become so unusual or extraordinary, that extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary action. And if he believed, and I do believe from what I read his report, if he believed that the president would have been tried had he not been running for office, he should have said so. If rather than letting it lay out there, knowing full well that most people in America think an impeachment is the actual ridding of a president, that most people don't understand the process, that most people don't understand the Constitution, most people don't understand the separation of powers and why we have it and why it works. And that this gray area needs to exist in a democracy, that gray area being that we don't know what an impeachable offense is unless the Senate at convictions time says it is. The forefathers left this huge gap within which there would be judgment and discernment. They wanted it to be difficult to impeach a president, and rightly so. And it applies to Trump and everyone else. He would have done the country a service had he said, with the things we saw, it's out of our purview. And all he had to do was say, there is, rather say, well, there are means, I guess, impeachment. Now, impeachment, again, doesn't mean you take the guy out of office. It simply means that you draw up charges, you do an investigation. Now, it's happening anyway, but had he said it, had he had the courage to say it, or even come out and said, based on what we saw, I believe X or Y, yes, would he have broken with protocol? Absolutely, but it was time to do that. At least based on my beliefs, we have a president who, he's done some good things. The economy's doing well. I wish he would shut up, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We have a president who has challenged the Constitution in every way, shape, or form, challenged the checks and balances, challenged the judges, challenged the opposition party, challenged the press, challenged anyone who disagrees with him, challenged veterans, challenged generals, anything that disagreed with him or anyone, including the very nature of our republic. He actually called the thing in the Constitution a phony, the Emoluments Clause, a phony clause. He had a responsibility if he felt as I do. Okay, maybe he didn't, but I believe that he did. If he felt as I do, he did a disservice to the country by not making history. And yes, the history would have been that he broke with protocol because he thought it was absolutely necessary. Now, it's a slippery slope. You have the former ambassador, Nikki Haley, saying today that she thinks the rats in the White House, so to speak, were John Kelly, the former chief of staff, and the former Mr. Tillerson, the former Secretary of State. And she makes a point. But again, they were looking to make history. It's interesting. It's a very slippery slope because she's saying that, well, it wasn't their place to disagree with the president, to undermine him. And boy, is that rich. You can do a whole show on that issue. And here's why. The president is duly elected. They were not. He pretty much gets to blow up the place. Except, once again, we arrive at that place where one is a traitor, not a traitor, but a hero. Our founding fathers were traitors. If you've ever seen the great movie Valkyrie, had Stauffenberg and the individuals who were planning the coup against Hitler when they set off the bomb in his bunker in Eastern Europe, and he had a headquarters at the front. They would have been heroes. There would be statues to them. And there still aren't anyway, because they failed. And so when you fail, you're a traitor. When you succeed, you make history. So, of course, your conviction has to be very powerful. As the founding fathers famously said, and I think it was Benjamin Franklin, we better hang together or we'll certainly die and hang separately. So that's why I have a problem with Mr. Mueller. He had his Benjamin Franklin moment. He had his Colonel Stauffenberg moment. And he jumped into the orchestra pit. That's my take. Say what you will. It doesn't make me right. It just makes me a person with an opinion. And it makes Radio Westchester the place where you can come and voice yours. You don't have to agree, disagree. In fact, you may be able to, some people do often, prove that I've been mistaken. Anthony does a great job of it. Mitch does. Others do. Have some fun. 914-222 3141, 914-222-3141. We're going to take a break, go to the top of the news, see what stories are out there, find out when this cold weather, the brr is coming. This is Radio Westchester. And we start a new hour. It is 7:07. Welcome. Let me see the temperature. It is 53, the highest it's going to get. It's going to begin to drop shortly. Rain will fall, and indeed, that is our headline as we head into the 7 o'clock hour. We want to take a look at this. We are, of course, it is Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. Welcome to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am he on Radio Westchester, the station at the New Rochelle train station. And people You'll begin to see them as the light comes up, running to the train, sometimes running frantically to catch their train. We are live here. We're all lit up like a little gem right in the parking lot next to the train station, across from the parking lot and the bus depot. It's called the Transit Center. Nice words here. On Radio Westchester. That is who we are. And let's take a look at the headlines. But first, a reminder, our programs today are supported by the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management, one of their shows coming on today, Aging Issues Radio. We'll be with you. We'll be talking with Joe Soroselli at 8:50. The law firm of Pena and Kahn, Dominic Cigars, and plug-in virtual reality. Our top stories this morning: winter weather, snow, historic cold, and that's the feature. Could chill the area today and into tomorrow. Also, New York will raise the age tomorrow to purchase tobacco to 21. So if you're in the military and you want to have a cigarette, you can die for us, but you can't kill yourself. That's how we do it. A rat problem. No, not in the White House. A rat problem is amplified by rodent-built tunnels. Tunnels in Yonkers have actually built, tunnels between apartment buildings there. And the landlord won't put out garbage cans. Makes no sense to us. And Representative Peter King, he from Long Island, after 28 years in the Congress, has decided to step down. But first, the weather. Alrighty, our weather this morning is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. It is 53. It'll hover around that. It's going to begin to drop, but not too much below freezing. Somewhere between 7 and 9 o'clock, we will get some rain, and then that rain will turn into snow. But light snow, they don't think it'll stick. We may get 1 inch, if that, but it'll only stick to frozen surfaces, likely melt. But tonight, the temperatures will drop down into the teens, and it'll feel like single digits because of a brutal historic cold. We once had weather like this back in 1926, but the lowest was 26 degrees. So we're getting down into the teens tonight. Hopefully the rain will have evaporated and we won't have any wet roads, and that'll all end by tonight, by the way. Getting into tomorrow, another historically cold day. But again, it's this afternoon. Wear layers. This afternoon and into the evening, there will be record cold. The days of 18-year-olds purchasing cigarettes in New York are about to end, according to a story in LoHa today. A new law will take effect tomorrow, raising the legal age to purchase tobacco products in New York from 18 to 21. The change was approved by lawmakers earlier this year and also includes vaping in an effort to curb teenage tobacco use. But it didn't take effect for 120 days to give retailers a chance to adjust. Governor Andrew Cuomo, who signed the item into law in July after signaling support for the measure, said the new age requirements to purchase cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, and other tobacco products will help protect an entire generation from the negative effects of smoking. This out of News 12 this morning, and what's troubling here is where are the garbage cans? Renters at one Yonkers apartment building say trash thrown onto the street brings dozens of rats into their home. And the residents at 288 and 290 Hawthorne Avenue said the trash problem isn't a new one. They pointed out rodent-built tunnels connecting the buildings, which they say have not been professionally patched, so they just stuck rocks in them. Families say they've begged their landlord to put trash cans, but nothing is happening. And now they're saying we didn't see it, so we have to say they allege that the rats are attacking women and kids, and people are actually hearing the screams. Some even say that the rats get into their hallways at night, making it impossible to walk to their apartment door without seeing one. News 12, who gave us this story, reached out to the landlord, but has not heard back. And as we said earlier, Representative I keep saying Stephen King. like a string of Peloponnese and the honeymooners. Representative Peter King, the 14-term Republican leader of the New York congressional delegation, who is an outspoken advocate for 9/11 compensation and Hurricane Sandy reconstruction, said yesterday that he won't seek re-election. His decision makes him the 20th GOP lawmaker to opt out against seeking re-election since President Trump took office. Now, in his case, he's 75 years old. He doesn't want to keep spending 4 days a week in Washington. He's getting tired. I get it. So, hey, I'm on the air. That's okay. You can come in and say hi if you want. Take a seat.
Oh my God, no, I'm going to catch a train.
All right, go ahead. Bye-bye. People just pop in. That's what we like. King's decision makes him again the 20th GOP lawmaker. Since George H.W. Bush sat in the Oval Office, King has represented Nassau and Suffolk counties on Capitol Hill, where he's made his name as a limelight-loving, open book. And he says, quote, "I hate Ted Cruz." He snapped when asked by MSNBC in 2016, "I think I'll take cyanide if he ever gets the nomination." That was typical of what he said. Mr. King, you're still in office, but we thank you for your service. And, I almost knocked over my coffee. It is 7:14. The phones are open, 914-222-3141, 914-222-3141. Now, we took a story out of the news today, and we're going to be talking, let's see, will we be talking with Duffy today? No, we will not. We'll be talking with him on Thursday. But we're saving this story for Mike Duffy, and we're gonna follow it. And let me share it with you. Connecticut State Police say they found drugs and a gun in a car during a traffic stop. This actually happened Friday. One Leon Spady of New Rochelle was pulled over on I-84 in Danbury for distracted driving before police allegedly made the discovery. The police say the weapon they found was reported stolen in Atlanta, Georgia. Spady is facing several weapons charges. Now, it is in Connecticut, and I don't know what their law is. In New York, we have a law that says you got to go to jail if you have a gun. But one of the things that we've been railing about here on this broadcast is that people get caught with guns all the time. They hundreds of records of arrests, 50 arrests, 30 arrests, muggings, robbery, drug possession, drug selling, assault, and the guy had a gun. As soon as he gets in there, they don't even mention the gun. We're going to charge you for assault here. Go ahead and walk, or we'll give you med tickets. You come back. Now, I know it sounds as an extreme. I'm exaggerating, okay? But what we're going to do, now this guy may not have a record at all. And it may be the one time, he may be a law-abiding citizen who made a mistake. And if he is, we don't want to see him go to jail on the one offense when all these other people are arrested 100 times and don't. But on the other hand, if he is one of those people with hundreds of arrests and convictions and gun charges and hasn't spent much time in jail, well, we want to know that too. So we're going to follow this case. Now, it may be an outlier because it happened in Connecticut. But anyway, we're going to hold on to this story. And just a reminder tomorrow, for those of you who like the drama and haven't had a chance to read the transcripts, the impeachment hearings will go live. People have said they don't want it, particularly the Republicans. They don't want it behind closed doors. Well, it won't be behind doors anymore, not starting tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, it will all be a matter of the public record. And what's likely, since the Republicans are not likely to convict, and I'm not sure I would either, I'd have to be convinced of it. Maybe, who knows, maybe after we hear, if it ever gets to articles of impeachment, it's presented right, maybe I would. But right now, my inclination is to let the people decide on Election Day. So at least you'll get a chance to hear what's in the transcripts. You'll get a chance to appreciate whether or not it's okay for a president, because there's no doubt now what he did. The question is, how serious is it? He has the foreign power to intervene. Now, you'll see in the New York Post, they're going to write a lot of stories. And if they're true, fine, let them do it. But they're going to focus on, why did the president's son, would he get a $50 a month, a week job, whatever it is, if he wasn't the vice president's son? Probably not. But did it have anything to do with Joe Biden? Was there anything offered? Was there a quid pro quo? I'm sure they want to know that. And you can't blame them for asking, quite frankly. But you're going to read stories about that. But that is secondary from the fact that the president's the one now in power. He did say, do this or you won't get your money. It was implied and almost said directly by some operatives. And you will have to decide. Not whether or not that happened, because that's going to be established, I'm pretty sure. But whether or not you take him out of office over it. I think some of our callers have rightly said it's probably gone on all the time. He just got caught. But then, do we not send Gotti to jail because lots of other mafia dons killed people? I mean, that's an extreme example, but you get my point. But for me, because I take such great, at least myself, I take great reverence in the election process. I would prefer that if the president's not going to be there, that it be done by vote. And so we shall see. It is 7:18. We're going to be talking with someone you love to hate these days. Some of you, Mike Edelman. Some of you love to love, political operative. He is not a Trump fan, that is for sure. Following that, the great local investigative journalist, Bob Cox, joins us at 7:35. Del Husler, a newsman from Yonkers. He's the publisher and editor of Yonkers Tribune, will be with us. Vince, with his God update, will be with us. And then Joe Sorcelli from Aging Issues Radio. And let's put on top of that, Jack Breslin coming in at 9 o'clock. Jack Breslin will be talking with us about how the impeachment hearings are likely to be carried out. Meanwhile, he always calls on time. I'm sure this is him. Please welcome political analyst Mike Edelman. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Well, I've went on one of my longer monologues, but I did it with gusto today. A lot of issues. Can I share a semi-local issue with you out of New Jersey?
Out of New Jersey? Yeah, I'm probably not familiar with it if it's in New Jersey.
No. You're familiar with it. You're familiar with it. Bridgegate goes to the Supreme Court. And do you,
okay.
And do you know what these operatives, now they went all the way to U.S. Court of Appeals. And why the Supreme Court is even hearing this is absurd. But now get this. They are saying that what they did, that is closing those lanes, was standard political, if you will, skullduggery, and should not be covered by criminal.
Well, that's a nonsense argument.
Of course it is.
Because what they did was was deprive taxpayers of access to their work to get across the George Washington Bridge. That's not standard political anything.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not standard. I've never heard of that. In my 72 years, I've never heard of inconveniencing in mass the largest city in the world, the center of the financial hub of the entire world, because you want to get a little mayor back in whatever the name of the town was across the bridge. I guess.
Now you're a lawyer.
That's not.
You're a lawyer. I'm sure there are nuances that the Supreme Court wants to look at, but I'm appalled that this is even going to the Supreme Court. And you know how I framed it? I framed it a little bit differently, Michael, where someone gets a call and their mother is near death, and you've got to get to Sloan Kettering in Manhattan.
Right. And you can't.
And now you can't. Or you've got an important job interview, or you've been late 77 times this week and you're going to lose your job. Whatever it may be, I am appalled that these thugs, these scum, want to try and get off on that basis.
Well, they can try. They have a legal right to try. But
of course
it
they
doesn't
do.
mean the court has to say yes. Like, people ask me, can I sue? I say, yeah, you can sue, but you can't collect.
Okay, we move on. I just wanted to get your reaction. I feel better talking about it already. So tomorrow, the impeachment hearings go public. Now, for people like myself and probably you, I've had to read just about every transcript, so I kind of already know what's going to be said. So the real question becomes, how shocked are the American people going to be, and will Trump supporters care?
Well, I think there are a couple of categories here. When you say Trump supporters, that number is dwindling as we speak. There are a huge number of people that took a shot in the last election for a number of reasons. They didn't like Hillary Clinton. They thought Trump was a successful business guy. They knew he was a celebrity apprentice star. So they said, you know what? We don't like Hillary. We're going to vote for Trump. Those people in the middle, in the swing states, they're going to have to decide whether the Constitution counts or whether tribalism counts. They're going to have to decide after they hear, and this is why the Democrats are doing it. They're doing it because you and I read the transcripts and take notes and all of that. But most people in the country are busy feeding their family, going to work, playing soccer. They're not interested. They're not following. But if you remember Watergate, once that was televised
Sure do.
back in the day. People were riveted by the testimony of, for example, John Dean.
Mm-hmm.
And that scenario, if that scenario develops in these public hearings, the reaction of most people who are fair, independently minded, and understand the nature of the Constitution and the democracy, those people will decide that Trump needs to be impeached. Now, that number's at about 50 now, 51. 58% of people, however, want to see the information. They want to make a decision based on evidence, not based on what Jake Tapper says and not based on what Sean Hannity says, based on their own eyes, their own ears, and their own intellect. That's what we're counting on in these proceedings.
Did you see the piece about Judge Napolitano on Fox?
I did. Absolutely did. Judge, he's spot on. He's spot on. He's an honest man. He's a libertarian, but that's no big deal. He's entitled to be whatever political persuasion he wants. But he is not going to cave to Rupert Murdoch. He's not going to cave to pressure from Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. He is not in the business of persuasion and being a shill like Jeanine Pirro is. He's in the business of analyzing facts. And his opinion is that Trump absolutely positively committed an impeachable offense.
Impeachable, but do you honestly think he'll be removed from office? The smart money says he won't be. The smart money says that the Republicans will not vote for him and that it'll be left to the people on Election Day. That the Republicans will not vote to
that's
him.
fine.
That makes sense.
But that's fine. I don't. Yeah, that's fine. I don't care that he's removed from office. That'll rip the nation apart. People will be claiming it's an overturning of the 2016 election.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go on and on. You know, Fox News. We didn't have Fox News during Nixon. Some people say that if there was a Fox News, Nixon would never have been impeached, would never have to leave office. That may be true, but now we have it. I don't really care if he's removed. If that's going to create havoc, I would rather avoid it. I think he's going to resign. I'll say it again and again. I do not think he's going to run in an election where Brad Parscale, his pollster, tells him he's going to lose 10 states. And that's where it is now. Why do you think he went after Joe Biden? He could have gone after Elizabeth Warren. He knows he can beat Warren. He knows he can beat Sanders. He knows he cannot beat Joe Biden. That's why he dipped in to the dirty tricks basket and went to Ukraine and wanted them to dig up dirt on Joe Biden.
725.
He knows his polls, and believe me.
725, we're talking with political analyst Mike Edelman. Giuliani's guy seems to be squealing already. That's going to be damning stuff, more so for Giuliani maybe even than the president. Where do you think this is headed for him?
I have a feeling Giuliani's going to be indicted. Lev Parnas, think of this. Lev Parnas, of all things to upset this Ukrainian gangster, was that Trump said he didn't know him. So Lev Parnas is now going after the investigation and cooperating with them. And he's going to reveal just exactly what Rudy Giuliani told him to do in Ukraine. And this is way before the phone call. The phone call was the culmination of what Giuliani and Sondland and the two Ukrainians, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, were doing. Okay? They were trying to leverage Ukraine into engaging in illegal campaign meddling in the 2020 election by arranging to investigate publicly not only Joe Biden and his son, but this debunked theory that the DNC server was located in Ukraine and that it was Ukraine that interfered in 2016 and not Russia. And that's nonsense, because his own Homeland Security director, Tom Bossart, said that is a debunked theory that holds no water, and if they go down that road, they're making a huge mistake.
Did you see the comments by Nikki Haley, who think that Kelly, and it's a very interesting slippery slope there, because I understand her point. Kelly and Tillerson, for people who don't like the president, they may feel that, well, they're stepping out like any other revolutionary, but that's almost treasonous if the president wasn't doing something egregious. Boy, that's a tough nut. What do you think?
I think that her trying to walk the line between being a Trump defender and outing two of the most competent people, and I'm quoting Donald Trump, that he could ever hire, Rex Tillerson and Kelly. Look, if those two guys were worried, you should worry.
Well, that's
He
true.
is revealing the fact
Michael?
that two guys close to the president thought he was a danger
Right,
to
Mike,
the
I know
United
that.
States.
I do know that. But our system requires that unless they're willing to stage a Stauffenberg-like coup, and of course I'm referring to the colonel that organized
Yeah.
the assassination of Chancellor Hitler. Unless they're willing to do that, theoretically, once we elect someone, we got to let them blow up the country unless we're willing, as Mueller did not, the timid Mueller, unless we're willing to finally step over that line and say this is unacceptable and proclaim it loud and clear. It's a very dangerous thing.
My opinion is that one of those two guys wrote the book Anonymous.
Yeah, it
Let's
certainly
start
looks
with
that way. All right, I want to go to something else. I'm loaded for bear today.
Okay, go.
Former mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg.
Yes.
Does he have a chance?
No chance.
Why?
No chance. First of all, the way it's panning out, even if Joe Biden loses Iowa, which is he may or he may not do great in Iowa, he may come in second, third. Who cares? He's ahead this morning in the Quinnipiac, New Hampshire.
Yeah, I saw that
poll by 12 or 13 points. Then it's going to go to South Carolina. All right. So far, Bloomberg's not in Iowa. He's not in New Hampshire. He's not going to run in South Carolina. And Joe Biden's going to blow everybody out in South Carolina. And then they go to Super Tuesday. So Mike Bloomberg figures if he can spend enough of his billions on Super Tuesday, he's going to be able to get votes. That's not correct analysis, and it's not going to happen. Joe Biden is beloved by the African-American community, which is more representative of the Democratic Party than Iowa and New Hampshire, for example. And Joe Biden is going to cruise through those Super Tuesday states if he doesn't have a dollar, but he will have money because the Super PAC is forming to raise millions of dollars for him.
Now, how much is going to depend on him having a suitable vice president who's not super duper to the left, unless he goes with Buttigieg?
No. He'll look. He's going to pick somebody that is not controversial. He may even pick Tim Kaine again. Tim Kaine was an excellent vice president from Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the recent polling, Biden beats Trump in 5 out of 6 swing states by a substantial amount outside the margin of error. So he's not going to put anybody controversial. Maybe he'll put Deval Patrick on. He's not going to put anybody who's controversial. He's going to put a nice, moderate person, possibly a woman, possibly an African American. I don't know. We're not there yet, but he's not going to put a nut job on the ticket with him because it's going to give the Republicans and Trump fodder. They'll go after the vice president because Joe's 77 years old. They're going to say, well, what happens if he drops dead in 6 months? You're going to get that person.
Okay, I got one more for you. I told you I loaded up for bear today. This U.S. prosecutor, Mr. Durham, out of John Durham, this guy is considered fiercely independent, a really good, decent man. The Democrats don't seem to be yelling and screaming and worried about that. Should they worry, do you think, or do you think this is just political? Because this guy's
political.
He's honest.
He's not going to do anything. He's not going to do anything to back up a false narrative. He's not going to do anything to take facts and turn them upside down like the Attorney General did when the Mueller report came out. He'll do his job. He'll issue his report. It'll probably be extremely dull. He'll find that Obama was not involved and Hillary Clinton was not involved. And all of this nonsense you're hearing from Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson will be buried because it is nonsense. They're creating it out of whole cloth, and they're doing it on purpose because they're trying to shield Donald Trump. He cannot be shielded at this point.
All righty. Anything else you want to add? Have I not set up a bowling pin for you to knock down?
Well, it rhymes with bowling pin. John Bolton.
Yes.
He's writing a book, $2 million advance. That's a big advance. But John Bolton was in the room, and he knows where the bodies are buried, and we will find out before 2020. Either he'll testify before Congress or we'll read the book.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much, Mike Edelman, political analyst. And how cold? By the way, it's going to get down to 18 tonight. What's the temperature down there in Florida?
We have an 8 in our temperature, too, except it's 81.
It's 81? Yeah, don't laugh. It's not funny. By the way, take care. Thank you very much, Mike Edelman.
Goodbye, Bob.
Folks, we have an announcement to make. I want you to know that the well-known newsman here in New Rochelle has paid off his gambling debt to Jake. little problem with his Notre Dame team. I'm not even sure what it is. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back with Robert Cox, Bob Cox. And as we announced this morning, due to my screw-up yesterday, he's with us today at 7:35, but assuming I don't blow up the planet again, you can schedule this, write it in your notebooks. Bob Cox will be with us each and every Monday at 9 o'clock for the whole hour. So that in future weeks, assuming it fits in with Bob's schedule. Right now, let's take a look at the weather. And as you know, the weather this morning is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. It is 53. The drizzles have started, at least a little bit here and there. We expect it to pick up. We'll get up maybe to, I think we're at our max now, about 53. And as the snow comes round, about 12 or so today, between 11 and 12, it shouldn't be too much. It shouldn't stick. They say even if we have accumulations, it'll just be on cold surfaces. But the real problem, even after that melts, will be tonight. The temperature dropping down to 18, and with the wind chill, it'll feel like 8 or 9. They're suggesting that you wear layers as well tonight. Clear and frigid with strong likelihood of setting new record lows. They say that look at this, record lows for Tuesday was 26, Bob Cox. The record low was 26 back in 1952. Tomorrow, a record cold. That is literally what the forecasters are telling us. A sunny, breezy, very cold, highs around 32. The wind out of the northwest, 10 to 20 miles an hour. It'll feel like 15. Wednesday night, partly to mostly cloudy, still very cold, but not as harsh as Tuesday. Now, the record for tomorrow, we may break it as well, is 24 degrees. Let me be sure I got this right. No, the record for tomorrow is 23 degrees, set back in 1986. It always gives us pleasure to bring on our next guest. And as we mentioned, when we have this man on, Hezi Harris, Black Westchester, Delphine Hoosler, who's joining us a little later, Brian Harrod, and others, when we created this radio station, one of the things that we were committed to was having these people that do the hard digging and local news on, and it gives us a pleasure to have with us Bob Cox. He is the managing editor and the publisher of Talk of the Sound, considered the source since 2008. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning.
So you paid off the debt. It only seemed I only saw singles there.
Yeah, I paid most of it last week, but I went and bought a cup of coffee with
Oh, he paid you in installments.
last week. So
Go ahead. Oh, wait.
I put him on a payment plan.
Well, we now know that you're honorable, Mr.
with the
Cox.
way Notre Dame's playing, I'll need to be on a payment
Bob
plan.
is very depressed today. Are you a Jet or a Giant fan? I think we covered
I'm
this.
a Giants fan,
You
so
you had a rough week.
rough season,
A rough season.
as has the Jets. So
All righty, let's get to cases. Bob, we spoke a little bit off air the other day. Things seem now once again to be heating up. The school system, the new school superintendent's only been there a week or so, and already some of the board meetings have been a bit of a dust up. What's your take on her start?
well, I mean, there was one board meeting last Tuesday, and the members of the so-called collective showed up and held up signs and then spoke during the public comment period. And a few of them were a little disruptive during the meeting, but just more of the same as to what's been going on. I think at this point they're being largely ignored by the board, which I think is causing members of the collective some frustration. But Dr. Fayou is just proceeding on, and as I figured, once she starts meeting with the teachers and going around the schools and meeting with the PTAs, people get to know her, she'll build more and more support. The likelihood of anything happening to her is past in terms of her leaving. There's currently 2 actions. One,
Yeah, the lawsuit.
complaint filed with the state ed commissioner, and a similar complaint filed in the New York State Supreme Court. Both of those are going absolutely nowhere, and the people involved know that. It's strictly a PR stunt. It's why I haven't really given it all that much coverage, because it's not really a sincere effort to remove her, because the basis for it, that the school board didn't follow its own policy, is silly, because the school board always has the right to suspend any policy. They do it all the time, and they pass motions. In this case, imagine a scenario where, by some miracle, the collective won its case. What would happen? Well, they would simply hold a session. They would vote to not have the advisory committee and basically rehire her under the same contract. So it would be just an accounting mechanism. So, but that's not going to happen. There's no court in this state that's going to tell a school district they have to vacate a $1.2 million contract. I could tell you the other 700 school districts would probably go crazy, and certainly not within state ed. So it's not going anywhere. They had a meeting at Bethesda Baptist Church last Monday. The strategy was laid out there, and it's basically to put the school board on notice not to do it again, which is fine. But the idea that it's going to cause any immediate change, that's not going to happen.
She famously, at least from my view, I shouldn't say famously, she's too new for that, but she seems quite willing to talk with these groups and take on all comers, at least from my observations. Is that accurate, do you think?
Well, to a certain extent, I suppose. I mean, the board has been talking, but I have a significant issue with that. The collective is not actually a real organization. It's not.
It's literally just a collection of different.
It's nothing. It's nothing. It's just a name, a word that a bunch of people threw out there. They don't have any bylaws. They don't have a roster of members. They don't have a bank account. They don't have any process for voting to make a decision like Robert's Rules of Order. They don't have a clubhouse. They're nothing. They don't have a website. They're nothing. They're absolutely zero. And it's not that there are not real people who say that they're part of the collective, but part of what?
Well,
right?
It's my understanding that the collective, though, does have some well-known groups such as New Roar, Indivisible, Westchester,
Well, how can they? They don't exist.
NAACP.
How can they can say that? They can say that, but it doesn't make it true. The fact is that the collective doesn't exist. Okay, it's just a word. And my problem isn't with that. I mean, what they're doing, they're free to do. They're free to get up and say at a meeting that they're part of something. They can say they're part of the Mickey Mouse Club for all I care. It doesn't really matter. What concerns me is that the school board would be treating with them as if they were a real group.
If I'm hearing you right, they're giving them too much respect.
Well, the NAACP should get respect.
Yes.
La Fuerza Latina, which is a group of Hispanics, should get respect.
Mm-hmm.
People who are elected officials, Damon Marr has been going there.
Mm-hmm.
Now Yadira Ramos Herbert has been involved from District 3. Damon Marr from a county legislator. All those people deserve respect. And the individuals who are speaking certainly deserve respect.
At those moments.
But the idea that there's an organization
Gotcha.
called the Collective, there is no such organization. And it's setting a terrible precedent. In fact, it goes against something that the board has long had a policy of. You may recall during the opposition to Echo Bay, there was a big fight in the school district, the school board, about a group called United Citizens for a Better New Rochelle. And the board refused to respond to them on the grounds that they didn't have any actual roster presence.
They
whatever.
weren't truly manifest.
Eventually they did create that, right? And then they got the meeting that they wanted to have. And so I would say to members of the collective, go form a real organization. Say who your members are. Say how you're making decisions, because this is an important thing. They filed a lawsuit. It says in the lawsuit, the collective. Well, who is that? Now, if a corporation or nonprofit, United Way, wants to file a lawsuit, GM, they can because they're incorporated. They're legally a person. The collective is not a person. It doesn't represent anybody. And for that reason alone, at least their standing in the case will be thrown out. Now, there's an individual person who filed both the SED complaint and the Article 78 that's going to the state Supreme Court, or has gone to the state Supreme Court. But I think that the school board has gone down a very bad path in this desire to, I don't know, be hip and accommodating. I don't know what the reason is, that they are allowing groups that don't exist, so nothing, to have meetings,
That's
to
really the
have a
crux of
say
this.
in what's happening. And more to the point, since the collective is really nothing, right? Who do they represent? They don't represent anybody. So you go to a meeting and you might see 10, 12 people, 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's important that the board understand, okay, that they are not a delegation from the greater body of this organization. That's it. Those 15 people, those 12, that's it. That's all they can muster to come to a meeting, because that's how many people they have. And if you peel it back a little further, you're going to find out that this is the same group of people who've been operating under New Roar, operating under Indivisible Westchester, and what you basically have is a handful of far left crackpots who are trying to create different names for themselves, to rally around different causes, to attract people who don't know any better, which is fine. That's a good strategy, right? If you're really small and insignificant, try to pretend you're big. Be the mouse that roared. That's what they're trying to do. Good for them. That's smart. What's not smart is the school board actually entertaining any of that claptrap, giving them special meetings. There's been at least 2 that I know of where the members of this so-called group have been invited to private meetings. Why? Why are they getting private meetings with the superintendent? Why are they getting private meetings with the school
I
board?
could only surmise that perhaps it was some of the individual people who represent real organizations, such as the NAACP, or they were not.
No.
Okay, that's interesting.
No. And so like I said, if these organizations want to operate in the light of day, that's fine. And like I said, NAACP and the other groups, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I don't like the idea that there's this, shadow group. And I'll go even further, because in at least 2 cases that I have mentioned to my readers, members of this group have been upset with me for taking their picture, okay, at public meetings.
Why?
I had that happen in July.
It's newsworthy.
I had that happen just at the last meeting, a school board meeting up at Albert Leonard. Because they want to operate in the shadows, a lot of these people. They don't want to be accountable for what the positions that they're taking. So they don't want to have their identity revealed. They don't want to have their photograph taken. Of course, that's ridiculous because, for example, the school board meeting is on TV. Okay, so you're already being recorded. But it's this mindset that I have a problem with, is that somehow you should be able to have a voice in local politics or the local school board, but we don't get to know who you are. We don't get to see who you are. And my readers know I've been recently on this hobby horse since yesterday about students at Northwestern University. You may have seen the story about the Medill School.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, well, where the newspaper actually wrote this long apology for doing terrible things like asking people for quotes for a story or taking their picture at a public protest. The big scandal was that they looked up the students' names they wanted to ask for a quote in the school directory. Well, since when is going to the phone book and calling somebody some kind of crime?
It's not.
What's embarrassing for that school, which Medill Journalism School is one of the preeminent journalism schools in the country, is that they're basically saying that they should not actually report about the people who attend public meetings. And I have an issue with that, obviously. I think that's a terrible thing. And I'm not saying the board is encouraging this or the city government's encouraging this. I'm basically calling these people out right here, right now, and saying if you want to go to a public meeting, then you have to be accountable for what you say. But the board, and I will add one other thing, okay? In 2018, the board had another meeting, an actual official board meeting at the high school behind closed doors that was only accessible to teachers and staff at the high school. Totally illegal. Totally illegal. So they're having a series of what I would consider to be very dangerous precedent-setting meetings with groups of people that want to hide.
My guest is Bob Cox. He's the managing editor, the publisher of Talk of the Sound. We're talking about the school board and the so-called collective and their efforts to get a hearing and hearings from the school board, which they're getting. This thing with Medill really troubles me a great deal. You have this August journalism school that won't practice journalism. That is amazing. But I want to go down one other path before we change the subject. Elected officials, you mentioned too, Ramos Herbert and Damon Marr. Now, Damon's in a county legislature, so I don't know what his limitations are. But here in New Rochelle, now that she has gotten her votes and has been duly elected, I had a Republican on the other day, Mr. Al Tarantino, and I told him if these people are going to attend those meetings and talk up on school board issues, it seems to me incumbent that the opposition do the same. Do you think that this so-called separation will be maintained, or do you think we're entering a new era?
Well, we're skipping over the results of the last election. So
no,
what
it's
opposition are you
right
talking
here. It's
about?
my first. No, it's well, Al.
The total extent of the only Republican that is, let's put it this way, there's two Republicans that are sort of above a New Rochelle resident in the food chain. There's Al Tarantino and there's Donald Trump. And in between, it's all Democrats.
It really
okay,
is,
at
isn't
every
it?
level of government. So what
Well,
opposition are you
even
talking
the
about?
opposition in thought, whether it may be a point of principle, they should not be involved in what's going on in the schools. And I know I'm wasting my breath, aren't I?
Well, I mean, the mayor opened Pandora's box.
I know he did.
I'm
I agree
going
with that.
back 8 years ago when he got very involved in my race
Mm-hmm.
for school board in 2011. He broke precedent. He endorsed other candidates. As I told you last week, he actually put out a statement saying, whatever you do, don't vote for Robert Cox. I would argue, and I think with good reason, that had I been elected in 2011, and I only lost by a small number of
I
votes,
know.
the school district would be a very different and better place, because the reality is I'm not on the school board. And I think you could argue that I've had more positive impact for change on the school district than anybody without a board seat. Maybe losing was a good thing because it freed me up to do what I do.
Your work, yeah.
But no, Mayor Bramson started this. He went so far as to actually use money from his political campaign a few years ago to jumpstart Todd Kern's campaign, which I thought was a terrible thing. Todd Kern should have certainly rejected that money. If no one wants to personally contribute his own money, that's one thing. I don't think that's so great either. But to actually take money that people gave you to run for county executive and then give it to a school board candidate seems to me to be ridiculous. With Yadira Ramos Herbert, she was not elected at the time. She now is.
Yeah,
but
you gave
she
her a
doesn't-
pass last week.
But she doesn't take office until January 1. But I think it's something she could consider. But what we're seeing more broadly with the involvement of Indivisible Westchester in our school district, which is driving a lot of what's happening with Dr. Fahey. Let's be honest about what's really going on here. This is a far left portion of the Democratic Party that is trying to assert power. And one of the ways they're trying to do that is through the New Rochelle School Board and in other ways around town. I think it's a terrible thing. And I will have an article. I don't want to get into it now because it's a little bit deep, not deep like philosophical, but just there's a lot to it. But I would just say this: I'll have an article that explains that even if the Indivisible Westchester New Roar so-called collective group of people, this far left group, got their way. Okay, which is ostensibly to have all minority administrators and teachers in our school district. Even if they got their way, it wouldn't move the needle one bit on the achievement gap between white, black, and Hispanic students in our school district. And the reason is because there is no evidence that would make any difference anywhere in the country, that having all black or Hispanic teachers and administrators makes any bit of difference. The biggest driver of academic success for a child in school is the educational level of the mother and the job of the father. Well, that's not going to change if you have all black or all Hispanic administrators and teachers. That's going to be what it is. So there was data presented, and to Dr. Fahey's credit, she's talked a lot about data,
Yes, she
which
has.
I'm a big data fan. I have an MBA from the University of Chicago. I'm a data person.
That diploma mill out in Chicago? Go ahead,
well,
Robert.
not Northwestern.
No, go ahead.
A real school. And so they actually presented the first batch of data came from Albert Leonard. Of course, people from the collective were booing the data.
Why do they boo data? How do you boo data?
Well, because the data showed that, for example, the advanced math and science classes had about 60% of the white students were in those classes, and around, I'm going to ballpark it, 15% of the black and Hispanic students were in those classes. And so they thought that's an evidence of racism at the middle school, because it shows that white students are getting treated differently than black and Hispanic students. That's totally wrong. I mean, the idea that the principal at Albert Leonard wouldn't love to have more minority kids in advanced classes is silly. But it's misleading in the data, and Dr. Feo needs to do a better job in that, to take aggregated data like that and just say, here's all the kids. Hold on, here's all the kids. You have to disaggregate it by the income of the father, for example, and the educational level of the mother. And we'd find out that if you have well-educated parents and a father with a good job, Black and Hispanic students are also represented in those classes, roughly equal numbers. But because we have such a large percentage of poor families, they skew that data.
Sure. Now, what the data must show, or is capable of showing, what the outliers are, or what the right interventions are needed to bring up the scores of minority children who come from a rough background. What are those things?
Well, if there was some silver bullet, it would have already been, fired. So you're not going to get around the fact.
But even given all the politics, I mean, aren't some silver bullets prevented?
We have a whole bunch of families here, okay, that the mothers don't even have an 8th grade education, okay? So how are they going to help their kid on the chemistry honors homework assignment? They're not. Okay,
but a tutor can.
We have a large number of people in this community.
But a tutor
where
can.
the fathers aren't even in the home.
No, I know, but a tutor can. I mean, in other words, here's my point.
So your proposal is to have 5 hours of tutoring every night for every kid?
No, I understand that.
Well, then how are you going to do that?
No, but what I'm saying is, and I'm not trying to solve this problem here and now, but what I'm saying is there's this debate of you have to change test scores, you have to allow for...
And it hasn't made a bit of difference.
No, that's my point. However, what I've always said is, and without being an expert at this, but applying the resources where they matter, which is extra tutoring, extra classes. I mean, some kids are going to some of these charter schools and doing much better.
But Bob, you have to want to go do that. And if the families aren't supporting it and the kids don't want to go, what are you supposed to do? Do you think that the problem in New Rochelle is that we don't offer after-school activities, that we don't offer tutoring, that we don't offer resources? We do, okay? People don't come. So if the parents don't want to make the kids come, and if the kids don't want to come, what's the school district supposed to do? The bell rings at 3 o'clock, the kids are gone. End of discussion. Now, you're talking about charter schools, okay? But those are parents who were motivated enough to go stand in line for a day and a half and get their kids into a lottery.
So are you saying that there is, I don't think you're saying there is no solution, but what you're saying is the solution isn't what some of these groups propose.
The only thing that I've seen in data that shows that there's any real difference is that there is research that shows that Black male students do better in elementary school if they have the opportunity to be assigned to a Black male teacher. But the effect of that goes away by the time the kid gets to middle school. But it does have an impact on the likelihood that a kid might go on to college. Okay, so there is some statistics supporting that. So if you want to focus on one thing, you could focus on trying to hire more Black male teachers in the elementary school. However, if you look at the government data on the number of people who are getting degrees, undergraduate and graduate degrees in education, you'll find out that Black male elementary school teachers are like unicorns. You're just not going to find them. They're not out there, and we should try.
We should try and push for that career path.
That's the only data that's out there that actually supports any of that.
756. I didn't want to cover this first because I didn't want you to gloat right away, but you can see up here I had election. Look at you grinning. You called every shot, and you called them almost to the numbers. You called them to the numbers.
On the mayor's race, I got it spot on.
Well, you got it spot on, too, in the Martha Lopez race.
No, Martha Lopez, I didn't think she was going to win by that much.
By that much?
But
okay.
I picked every race correct, but I picked... Sarah...
I can't wait till we fix the cameras and people could have seen that grin. My guest is Bob Cox, the managing editor and publisher of The Talk of the Sound. Consider the source since 2008. Continue, Bob.
Well, it doesn't take being a mind reader, okay? It requires being familiar with the 44,000 roughly registered voters and who votes. And I've run all these numbers many times for many elections. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that there are not the numbers to support Republican candidates, in New Rochelle. And Lou Trangucci was an outlier, but he got flipped around because a lot of the Hispanic support that he had went away because for once I would say they had an appealing Hispanic candidate, and Martha Lopez. The last couple maybe weren't so appealing, and they lost.
Did Zapata draw off any votes? The
I
writing
didn't.
guy?
I didn't look at the numbers after they did the paper ballots, which is where he would have shown up. But I can't believe it was significant. And obviously, she won by a 2-1 margin, so it doesn't really matter.
Do you know what was a little significant? That Belmont, a Republican, a very popular Republican in Harrison, and I know you don't follow those other cities that much, but this guy was an institution, and he was losing all night. He won in the back nine, and even Republicans and Republican strongholds didn't have it as easy as they usually do.
Well, I think that the actual big news coming out of the New Rochelle election was after years of 10,000 votes being cast citywide, you had over 13,000
Yeah, it's a
cast.
little bit
So
of a
that
move.
was big numbers. And that was actually the basis for my projection. I had said if it was over 10,000, then the mayor would win by the numbers I gave,
Yes, he did.
67-33. If it was between 8 and 10,000, the mayor would win with maybe the 50s, like 57.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was below 8,000, then maybe Brendan Conroy had a chance. Well, once I saw the numbers coming in, when you're at 20% and you're already at 3,000 votes cast, you can do the math, right? It's going to be well over 10,000, and so he didn't have a prayer right from the beginning, but not that he ever had one anyway. And it's not people want to say, well, he didn't run a good race, or it had nothing to do with that. It has to do with the numbers in New Rochelle,
Demographics, yeah.
and they are what they are.
And he got up to snuff on the issues I thought as well. He might have, given the time allotted and given his background. Let's look forward. What are the stories that you're working on? What are we likely to hear in the weeks ahead? And what are you working on right now that might be popping up, let's say, tomorrow on
Well,
your
I think
site?
the biggest story in New Rochelle, and it'll play out over the next 90 days, is what does it mean for Democrats to have a 6-1 majority and on city council, and what is it? And what are the implications for downtown development? And I would submit to you that the mayor, being pro-development, right, is in a much worse place than he was, because Jared Rice and Lou Changucci voted down the line with the mayor on development.
Mm-hmm.
Martha Lopez and Yadira Ramos, who are replacing those two, in
They seem
District 1 and 3,
they seem more independent.
I would say they're anti-development. Okay, and it's interesting. Yadira Ramos Herbert, she's partially black, partially Hispanic. So one of the questions was, in my mind, where's she going to sort of situate herself? Who's she going to identify with? Because she could identify with both black and Hispanic, and she seems to be throwing in her lot with being Hispanic. She went to Martha Lopez's victory party. She addressed the crowd in Spanish. They talked there about the fact that they now have 2 Hispanic city council members, which is historic. It's interesting also because it leaves the black community then with 0 representation for the first time that I can recall since they did the federal redistricting. I think this is the first time that this happens. You're talking about decades of no actual black representation.
Any good politician, wouldn't she want to wear both hats?
Well, but where's she gonna? Where's her power base? In other words, where's she gonna vote? Okay.
Well, 30% of the city's Hispanic.
Well, and so there's initiatives like, for example, the Lincoln Avenue corridor. Where's she going to come down on that? That's a major project. So I think the mayor is in a much worse situation. I think if you are looking at that council, he has Liz Freed and Sarah Kay.
Has Sarah Kay said anything to anybody
No,
yet?
but they're basically sock puppets for Noam. Okay, let's just be honest. Okay, they're just there
I've
to
been saying that for
vote how Noam tells them to vote. I'm not even sure Liz Freed's even reading the resolution. She just shows up and votes how the mayor says. She says very little. She's not very involved in her district. And as you said, Sarah Kay didn't even make any public appearances that we know of. So neither deserve any credit at all for being anything other than the mayor's sock puppet until they prove otherwise. That's fine. So he's got 3 votes, including himself. He's got 2 people, Yadira Ramos Herbert and Martha Lopez, who are probably going to oppose him on development. They've already indicated that. And that leaves 2 people in the middle, Ivar Hayden and Al Tarantino. And I think if I was those 2, I would feel like I'm in the catbird
They have
seat.
a lot of power. They're the Justice
As long
Kennedy
as they
of
stay
the
together, Noam needs both their votes to get anything through. And that gives the 2 of them a great deal of power. So it's funny because for Al, as the lone Republican, he probably has more influence on the city council than he did when there was 2 Republicans.
Oh, that's very true.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to kid him. I think he's on tomorrow. I'll have to let him know that.
Well, he probably won't admit it to you, but I'm just telling you as a
Oh,
political
well, no,
analysis.
We're going to make him admit it when he comes on. Of course, for those of you
If he's
listening,
not smiling, I'd be surprised.
Al Tarantino, unusual, very popular Republican, District 2 here in New Rochelle, has long been a guy literally dead set in the middle, and a very interesting man indeed. Ivar Hayden, a little less so. But so what else are you working on? So we know that that's going to be the big issue in New Rochelle going forward. What else are you doing?
Well,
what can we look forward to that maybe you're not on yet, but you'll be looking into?
Well, George Latimer does not seem to want to let go of me, so I'm going to probably have to write something about George.
You and George.
Well, it's just funny because he has almost unanimous acquiescence from the Westchester County media. They're basically bootlicking lapdogs for Latimer, and yet there's one little guy, in New Rochelle, who occasionally points out that the emperor's not wearing any clothes, and he goes crazy. And by crazy, what I mean is he and his communication staff are constantly coming into me on Facebook and Twitter to attack me for what I'm saying.
Okay.
And so what I've been saying is number one, this sales tax increase that George got passed and went into effect August 1 is not a 1% sales tax increase. It's a 14% sales tax increase.
For those who got the increase.
The math is fairly simple. Well, it's not a matter of who got the increase. I'm just saying the increase that he pushed through was a 14% increase in the sales tax. Okay, it went up 14%, not 1%. George has this. I don't even know where he's getting this from, but you would think that he has somebody on staff who can do basic math, but I guess he doesn't want to listen to them. But then I was concerned about when the budget was announced, and my reaction was, okay, here's a budget that has news making in a bunch of ways, okay, and let's watch how it gets portrayed. George wants to portray it as this budget that has a tax cut, property tax cut in it, okay, and that's basically what the headlines focused on. Okay, Latimer announces there'll be a tax cut. There's $1 million tax cut. There's $1 million tax cut. $1 million on what? $1 million on $570 million. So it's 0.1%. Mm-hmm. The average taxpayer in New Rochelle pays $17,000 in property taxes. About 20% of it goes to the county. That's $3,400 on average. And 1.1% of that is $3.40. That's the tax cut that we're getting. Meanwhile, we got a 14% increase in the sales tax, and that was projected in August to generate $130 million in new sales tax revenue. In the budget, it actually says there's $100 million. So one of the things that the media hasn't bothered to pick up on is, well, what happened to that $30 million that they were projecting in August? Now all of a sudden we get down to the budget and it's $100 million. But it's $100 million in new taxes. You can argue whether it's 1% or it's 14%, but it's $100 million in new taxes.
In real dollars.
And the budget, for the first time in the history of Westchester County, is exceeding $2 billion.
Yeah, $2 billion.
So you would think that the headlines might be things like, first time ever county budget exceeds $2 billion, right? Or it might be Latimer pushes through over $100 million in new expenses. But that's not what the coverage. The coverage was all in this 0.1% property tax increase. And when I pointed it out, George got all upset at me over the weekend and starts tweeting that I'm making things up. And he puts things out there like you hate Democrats and like as if this is irrational. It's just simple math. Okay, this is what he's actually doing. My concern isn't with George portraying things the way that makes him seem better. My concern is that we have a local media that goes along with that. Fios 1, News 12, the Journal News. They just say whatever he says. If you look at the Journal News article, they have in the article that there's a $2.1 billion budget.
Yeah, they did, and they had this. There was
paragraph.
There was a sub headline that said, yeah.
They added that later. After
is that right?
After I criticized.
So after you criticized, because I saw the second headline
Yeah.
and I talked about it on the air.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I have Marco Langerello has one of the bylines in this, and I have tremendous respect for Mark. He's probably the best.
Yeah, he's the best out
in
there
the
right
county.
now.
Okay, so but he doesn't write the headlines and he doesn't edit the stories.
Right.
So why is the most important historical part of the budget that it's exceeding $2 billion for the first time not even in the headline? It should be the lead of the story because that's a big deal. Why? Because We're the most heavily taxed county in the country. And if you look at New York State, I'll ask you a little trivia question, Bob, since you're old enough, you probably remember.
There he
Okay.
goes. You saw it, Jake? There goes the age card again. Go
What
ahead.
was the highest number of congressional districts that the state of New York ever had?
21.
45.
Okay, I did not know that.
45 in the 50s.
How many
Okay.
we have now?
Right now we have 27.
Okay, I thought it was 21. Okay.
And we're projected to lose 2 more.
Okay.
Okay. Why are we losing congressional districts at such a rate?
Because people are leaving New
Yeah,
York.
people are leaving in droves. In fact, New York State this past year, according to the interim census report that was done, had more people leaving than any other state
yes.
in the country. So you can sit here and you can keep doing this kind of stuff, but what the news media is not covering that I take issue with is what George actually did, okay, is he permanently increased spending by over $100 million. That is money that you will now keep adding on to as you operate under the tax cap or whatever they try to do. It's all going to be 1%, 2%, 0%, 3% increases. But that $100 million, that'll be there
That
to your
it's an
grandchildren's
infrastructure expense.
grandchildren die. That will be there forever.
But now that 100 million though is coming in on the basis of his tax increase.
which is a permanent tax increase that people of this county will be paying for in perpetuity. Do you think that number is ever going to go down?
they never do.
Okay, so, and this is one of the things that I don't understand. They go around and they ask people about this, and they put people on TV who say, well, we haven't had a tax increase for a while. Yeah, but the amount of money the government's taking in has been increasing because of the way money works and the way inflation works. They've been taking in more money. It's just that they're spending more money.
By the way, I'm going to have Jake give you $3.40 before you leave today. Bob Cox is our guest.
Tell George
he's
to
the
give me
managing editor, the managing editor and publisher of Talk of the Sound, the Source since 2008. What else might we be reading about? So we know we're going to read about George. We know you're following the schools. What else have you got your nose into?
Trees.
You're branching into trees.
So,
What about trees? Let's do that before we send you on your way.
well, the girl who got
Because I
injured-
want people, excuse me, I want people to be reminded that Bob will be with us each Monday for an hour, and we'll cover his stories in detail as we're doing our best to do now. Go ahead.
So the girl who got seriously injured by the tree on Halloween night, led me to ask a bunch of questions of the city government and of Con Ed. And I want to understand the whole tree issue, the tree removal, forestry management. It's something be honest with you, I never paid attention to, and I don't see anybody else paying attention to. But when you have 3 people seriously injured in the past year, which we had 2 city workers at 2 different parks plus this girl, maybe it's time that we prioritize looking at forestry management in this city because we have people getting seriously injured, and do we want to wait till somebody gets killed?
You know I have to say this, right? If anyone can get to the root of the problem... don't.
There's only one person listening to that remark that's laughing, and he's in front of the microphone right now.
I like bad jokes. See, I love my puns. Where does Santa Claus, since Christmas is coming, where does Santa Claus put his money, Bob Cox?
I don't know where.
Snowbank.
Oh, Snowbank. Okay.
Bob, thank you very much for giving us all this time this morning, folks. Each and every Monday, now that I squared all this away, Bob Cox, managing editor of the Talk of the Sound, considered the source, and rightly so. Thank you very, very much for being in here this morning. All right. I gotta do the weather. We gotta do the weather. Let's see who's coming up in this hour. Delphim Husler, his maiden voyage from the Yonkers Insider. Vince Russo, he found God in his glove compartment or in his trunk. We're not really sure. Joe Soricelli from Aging Issues Management, and Jack Breslin is coming up. Thank you, Bob Cox. It is 8:11. Where is the weather? Is it wet out there, Jake? Oh, please. Is it cold yet? Look at you have his little T-shirt on. When you come back, yeah, I'm losing my mind. All right. Del Husler, we can't wait to talk with Del because he's adding to our lineup of people whom do all the hard work. And when I say all the hard work, these are the local journalists who've been digging hard and getting you the real stories in these cities. He joins the ranks of Hezi Aris, John Bailey, the folks from Black Westchester Magazine, our fave, of course, they're A.J. Woodson, the editor-in-chief. But let's go to the weather. And the weather, of course, this morning is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. It's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. 57 in the rain, 53 rather, pardon me, and the rain has begun. We're not going to get much higher than that. Now, the rain is not falling heavily. It's going to drizzle off and on and maybe drizzle a little more heavily, and that's going to turn heavily, and that's going to change to snow and likely not amount to very much. Maybe on some cold surfaces and on some grass surfaces, you might see some. They said maybe an inch. It won't be there by nightfall, but the cold weather will be. A huge Arctic blast. And what we're talking about tonight, clear and frigid with strong likelihood of setting a new record low for today and tomorrow, which we'll get to. We're talking lows of about 18 degrees. It'll feel like single digits to near zero tonight. Multiple layers will be needed. That means layers of clothes, folks. Now, what they think will break is a record from 1952. I was 2 years old, for those of you counting. It was 26. And for tomorrow, which we'll get to in a moment, the record low was in 1986 when I was 36 at 23 degrees. And tomorrow they are calling for record cold. In this report, we have big, bold letters, record cold, sunny, breezy, very cold, highs around 32. The wind out of the northwest, 10 to 20 miles an hour. Feels like 15 to 25 degrees Wednesday night. Pardon me. Partly to mostly cloudy, still very cold, but not as harsh as Tuesday night. Lows around 24 degrees with lighter wind. This hour coming up is brought to you by the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.com. Aging Issues Management and their subsidiary, I don't mean that literally, but their offshoot, Aging Issues Radio, their show today. You won't want to miss it at 12:30. The law firm of Pena and Kahn, Dominic Cigars. They are the folks that bring you Jake's Picks of the Week each and every Friday. They're over here in Larchmont and plug in virtual reality and experience that you should try and have for yourself. You can call us at 914-727-2726, 914-727-2726. We can also bring it out to your party or your affair. It is Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. The show is Mornings with Bob Marrone. We are live at the radio station. Thank you, Jake. We're going to talk with someone. Jake, take a seat. I want to ask you about what happened last night in the football world. Jake is in here working on all kinds of things feverishly. He did not like my joke. I thought that was pretty good, that one of the best investigative journalists around is looking into the tree situation, and he'll get to the root of it. He's branched out into this, you know. He's turning over a new leaf.
A young girl's dead, Bob.
No, she's not dead. She got hurt.
Okay.
Oh,
Then,
no.
it was a funny joke. I love it.
You don't really love it. So last night, what happened in Monday Night Football? You're our football guy. We got to get more football. People love this stuff.
It was very interesting. Very good
listen.
game. Very good game. It was almost the first game to end in a tie, a Monday Night Football game to end in a tie since 1983.
Wasn't it a kick at the end that won it like with a second
kick.
left?
It was the 49ers. It seemed it was going to be a Cinderella story. The 49ers kicker got hurt midweek, so they called in a kid out of college, undrafted, gave him a tryout.
Where was he? Just hanging around, playing like semi-pro or
Just
something?
waiting for a phone call, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Staying in shape, waiting for a phone call. They called him, tried out, made the team for this game, last night's game. Kicked 2 field goals, needed a 47-yarder to send it into overtime with no time left on the clock. Hit the 47-yarder. Had a chance last night. Had another 47-yarder to win the game with under 2 minutes to go. Shanked it about as far left as you could hit it. Wasn't even close. Seattle came down. They hit their 40-yarder to win the game.
47 yards, tough.
It's tough, but you're professional. You're in the NFL. You got to make that. That's
What's the longest one? Do you know?
I think 64. I know the guy with half a foot in the 70s
Yeah, he did
set the
that.
record, which seems kind of
Stumpy, yeah.
cheating.
No, actually, I remember he was great. He was actually
If I was
pretty good.
really into it, I would cut off half of my foot. If I would
You-
really put like a steel plate into my cleat.
All right, let me ask you something.
I want to ask you
Aren't
about
most
this,
of them now side kickers?
yes, I
Soccer
think so.
style? Yeah, okay, go ahead. What do you got?
this hockey guy. I'm just reading about this Don Cherry.
Yes, he's
Oh my
he's an
gosh.
institution. Don Cherry
Seems
is
like what he got fired for is
Don Cherry. If he were a politician, would be Donald Trump. But I don't. What I mean by that is outspoken, brash. He's been that way. He was a veteran minor league defenseman. They made a movie about him. Pretty good, but he was back in the days of the 6-team league, so they really didn't get much of a shot in the NHL. But became a coach, coached the Boston Bruins and the Colorado Rockies. And he was known, right out of Central Casting, for the flamboyant dress, had a pit bull. And that's our guest coming up. But hold on, we will be right with you, Del. But he's often said a lot of strange stuff.
I think what he got fired
He
for.
used
I
to
mean,
hate
this is
Russian
hockey.
players. He used to hate Russian players until they
And he was
did well.
dismayed about the dwindling amount of fighting. In the
Yeah,
game.
those kinds of things. So now you got him. He's very brash, but he went too far when he attacked, I guess, immigrants.
His quote was, "At least you could pay a couple of bucks for poppies or something like that." I don't know what poppies are. It's a Canadian thing.
No,
These
you've
guys
seen them. We
paid
have
for your
poppies
way
too.
of
They have
life.
big poppies. We have the little poppies that we stop for red light.
These guys paid for your way of life that you enjoy in Canada. That seems pretty high. He's an 85-year-old guy.
Actually, I thought he should have been suspended, not fired. But he's 85 and he's been on the air for about 40 years. He's a really very good. He's fun, but he's fun the way Donald Trump was fun on The Apprentice. You know what I mean? He'll being brash.
I thought these Canadian
But he's
hockey people had thick skin. Let the guy.
Dollars, my friend, dollars and cents.
We have time
Actually,
for the Mike Francesa stat of the day.
yeah, yes, we do. Go ahead. Hold it.
Today's Mike.
It's time for Mike Francesa's Fact of the Day from none other than Jake Schaefer, our man, our football and sports guru. Go ahead.
Mike started off at CBS Sports in 1982 as the behind-the-scenes statistician. Focusing on college sports, he earned such a reputation that the New Yorker termed him Brent Musburger's brain. From there, he moved to the NFL, where he was the primary researcher for Jimmy the Greek.
Now, did you note that he was Don Imus's sports guy? Did you
I
get to that
have
yet?
I have a fact involving
That'll come up tomorrow.
Dynamis that
Okay.
I'll
We'll
save.
come
I
up with
think I'm
that
gonna use it
tomorrow.
on Thursday.
All righty, it's time to bring a new guest in. As you know, when we created this radio station, in addition to being all things, and what I mean by all things, hyper local, but also doing regional and national news, opinion, history, politics, arts, movies, books, all that's coming your way. But one of our commitments was to find all of the local journalists who've been running blogs and small newspapers and digging, the Bob Coxes, the Hezzy Harrises, the Black Westchester Magazine, and more. And one of them is with us now. He once ran for county executive, by the way. Please welcome from the Yonkers Insider, Del from Husler. Good morning, Del. How are you?
Good morning, Bob. I'm doing tremendous. Always nice to be on the air with you.
Well, it's always nice to have you, and we want to do so regularly now. But first, let people get to know you. How long have you been running the Yonkers Insider?
Over 16 years now.
16. What made you get it started?
When I was working at the Home News and Times with Dan Murphy, there were some times when I would write stuff and it wouldn't go in, and I said to myself, "Let me start my own blog, and then I don't have to worry about it going in or not going in." So, plus, I thought there was like a vacuum where some of the mainstream media in the county had not been covering Yonkers in the county, and I figured that was the vacuum that needed to be gone through, and a place where the people can see the news every day.
Well, that's very useful. Now, is it's a website, right? Do you produce it in paper, or it's an online site, correct?
It's an online site, yes.
Okay, the Yonkers Insider. What's a typical story like, and what are you working on today?
Basically, whatever comes across my desk, and I'm always constantly working on trying to get interviews, and because now I have the availability now to have Facebook Lives to add everything to my reporting stuff. So it comes on a daily basis. Whichever news comes up at the very moment, I'm always constantly working and always trying to get my readers the most updated and most important news for them to have the knowledge of.
Now, Yonkers is an interesting place. You cover Yonkers. I know you know each other. Harris covers Yonkers. You've got quite a situation there with the mayor will be mayor for life now that he's done away with term limits. It's hard for a Democrat to lose there now.
That's true. Yes.
Did you cover when he managed to engineer the city council to where he got an extra term?
Yes, I did. I actually, when it first happened, I said to myself, but the voters voted against this twice, and to me, it was an issue about the will of the people and the will of the voters, but it didn't. The voters didn't seem to matter in that case.
No, they didn't, and he probably should have went to another referendum. But hey, they
I
do what
agree.
they can do. You ran, I do believe it was a county executive. You ran about 6-7 years ago.
Actually, I ran for county legislator.
Oh, that's right. Yes. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. Why did you run?
Oh, no problem. I ran because I wanted to give back to my community. I felt a passion to run for public office and to try and advocate for the people who I feel have been let down by the politicians. I felt the politicians were not really looking out for the people, and I thought I could be a voice for them and be their voice and give them back their voice.
Well, I remember that.
As an elected.
The great Phil Reisman wrote a piece about you, which I'm sure you have. It was kind of nice.
I remember that. Yes, that was in the race when I ran against Gordon Burroughs.
Yes, you did. He finally lost this time around, though. But kind of interesting. It took him a while. Let's go back a little bit in time. Now, of course, you used to have a full-time job when you were doing this. What got you first started in your interest in the news?
Well, like I said, in terms of other medias not really seeing the news, and because I was saying to myself, I see a lot of stories, but it's not going on the different airwaves and stuff. And I said, let me see if I can. When I first started this 16 years ago, I said, let's see how long this is going to go because the thing was the people were not getting a lot of news. Because I was talking to a lot of people on the street, and they said to me, we're not getting all this news. What's going on? We know all these different things, but nothing ever comes out. And I said, well, let me start my own blog and see how far it goes. And here I am 16 years away, still reporting the news on a daily basis and still enjoying it.
Now, you also had a full-time job while you were doing this. When did you eat?
Yes. I did Meals on Wheels, and I made a decent amount of money there. But what's happened now is I've added to my blog. I've added now advertising, where I'm able to make some money with some of the advertisers I got, and I got a good amount doing the elections, which is good. And I always try to reach out to organizations and businesses to try and get advertising them because I don't just have the blog. I have my social media platforms on Twitter, Pinterest, and also my Facebook group and my Facebook page as well.
Yeah,
and also Instagram.
I'm finally starting to build all those things. 825, we're talking with the publisher and managing editor of the Yonkers Insider, Del from Husel. Did I pronounce your name right? It's Husel. Yes, okay, Del. Now, Del, were you born and bred in Yonkers?
Actually, I grew up in Bronx, not too far from Yonkers. It was actually on the Bronx Yonkers border in Riverdale on 262nd Street.
Oh, okay. Geez, that's right. Riverdale is right next to Yonkers. It's a nice area too, Riverdale, isn't it? What's your top story right now? What are you working on?
I guess see how Yonkers is going to evolve now that the mayor got reelected again, to see where we are in some of the issues. The issues that have been happening in Yonkers. That we always have an underfunding from the state about the money for our education system. Also one of the other stories, which is an interesting story, is about this whole thing with Empire State MGM. MGM's trying to get a full gaming license from the state, and from my interviews and talks with the mayor, that the state wanted to hold off on that for 2 or 3 more years.
Why?
So,
Why do they want to hold off?
I don't know.
That? I mean, as you well know, they have all the
Mm-hmm.
machines. They have horse racing. Everybody has to travel upstate to gamble or down to
Mm-hmm.
Atlantic City. Why not finish the job here in Yonkers? And I'm surprised
I
MGM wouldn't have bought
agree.
it. You know?
Yeah, I agree. It's it always seems like to be a battle between Yonkers and the state and everything. I'm saying to myself, why can't there be always like a common ground where if Yonkers succeeds, the state succeeds.
Well, yes, of course, but you know how that is, and they're constantly fighting with Albany as well over the school
That's
formula and
true.
how the school gets
Yeah,
paid
that's
for.
true.
But that so now what the mayor obviously supports MGM, does he not?
Yes, he does.
Okay, because that makes a lot of
And
sense.
from what I understand, he's going up to Albany advocating for them. So but like I say, it comes down to a situation where advocating is just a matter of the state and Yonkers coming together, and it seems that all continues to be that divide between Yonkers and New York State government. And it's sad because Yonkers really has great potential. It's hopefully one of these days we'll really will really exceed our potential that we have, because we've got a lot of good things in this city.
Well, and even the topography, it's by the water, it's hilly like San Francisco. There's a lot to offer in Yonkers, and
Absolutely.
well, what we want you to know is if you are game every Tuesday at this time, we'd love to have you come on and tell us what
Oh,
your top
great!
stories are.
I look so forward to it. Thank you so much. I really look forward to doing this every week. Thank you.
Now, before you move on, we want to give you a
Yes.
chance to plug your paper. How do people get to look at it, and what other social media are you on? Tell them what it's called.
Okay. My blog website is www.yonkersinsider.blogspot.com. I'm also on Facebook, on a Facebook page and group, Yonkers Insider Newspaper. You can follow it or like it and look at it, because I post all my news on there. Also posted on Twitter and Pinterest, and also have an Instagram page as well, Yonkers Insider too.
Well, you keep doing what you're doing, and another thing, you of course have my off-air number. If a story breaks and you need to get it out there, and you want to direct people to your paper, you give us a buzz, and we'll get you on.
Thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate and I look so forward to being on your show every week. Thank you so much.
Okay, and when you get a chance, you're around New Rochelle, come in, see us live. You'll see our new studio.
I will. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Del Husler, everybody. He is the managing editor and the publisher of the Yonkers Insider. Coming up, we're going to talk with Vince Russo in a minute. You know, a story in the paper today kind of broke my heart, and I didn't get a chance to share it with you when we were doing regional news today. This happened over a weekend. For all of us who have children in sports, college sports or high school sports, a gymnast, only 20 years old, fell off the bars. I don't know if you saw this, Jake. An All-American college gymnast from Connecticut died after slipping off the uneven bars during practice, suffering a spinal cord injury, her family and school said Monday. Southern Connecticut State University student-athlete Melanie Coleman, 20, was gravely hurt in what family friends described as a tragic freak accident while practicing, and succumbed to her injuries. Coleman's mother described Melanie and the young woman's 4 siblings, including 2 gymnast sisters, as inseparable. The injury occurred after she slipped off the bar, and I guess it happens. You don't hear about this too much. I always wonder when you see people who do this. In fact, we're going to ask Vince about that when he comes on. He was a gymnast and worked with some pretty good people. How do we keep this from happening? The injury occurred again after she slipped off, and I'm trying to get the uneven bars. I'm not sure I know which ones they are. And wow. She had been named a Women's Collegiate Gymnastic Association All-American this year and previously made it to the top level of the Junior Olympics program. She graduated from Jonathan Law High School in Milford, where she was captain of the team. And there's nothing else you can say, folks, except just a bad luck, a bad accident. God bless this kid. I don't know. I just can't help but thinking of my grandson, who's 17 and getting ready probably to play college hockey now in another year. And, The only thing, but 20 is still too young. You die doing what you love. I guess that's a good thing. But Jake, 20 years old, man. God bless her. All righty, it's 8:32. We're going to take just a quick look at the weather. Again, it's raining only very lightly outside, but the temperature is going to drop. Right now it's 52, or is it? Yeah, it's 43. It dropped precipitously, as they said it would. It's down to 43 already, Jake. And all right, let's look at what's coming up. Vince is coming up at 8:35. We're going to ask him about that injury. Joe Soroselli at 8:50, and then Jack Breslin, Professor Jack Breslin, at 9 o'clock. And we just got a call from, or at least a note from Dr. Sternberg, confirming that he's going to be on Friday, and that's an important thing. Well, let's look at Wednesday. I want to share with you what's coming up. We're going to be busy the rest of the hour, as you know. And tomorrow, Jeannie Zano's with us, Al Tarantino, Harlan Ullman, and I know he had been traveling internationally. It should be interesting to find out what he can find out, and maybe he can shed more light, given his contacts in the Ukraine and elsewhere, what's going on there, and whether he thinks that Michael Bloomberg has a chance. So all that, again, coming up. Now, we had today, we talked a little bit about this earlier, the U.S. Supreme Court setting a date to hear the Bridgegate case. We're not going to go through a whole bit of the news right now. We've probably done enough news for the day. But that case, for those of you who may just be joining us, and we did a monologue about it a little earlier, this is the case of Bill Marrone and former Christie administration official Bridget Ann Kelly. These are the individuals who had the George Washington Bridge toll lane shut down in order to get politically even with someone who did not endorse Governor Christie when he was also he was running for re-election as governor, but he was looking to burnish his image so that he could run for president. And what these people are saying, and they got all the way, they got convicted. They went to appeals, that failed. They went to the U.S. Appeals Court, that failed. And now they're going to the Supreme Court because their position on this is that it was political shenanigans and that political shenanigans should not be considered a criminal offense. Boy, I hope they break rocks. Okay, he's with us now. You heard the jingling as we come up now on 8:35. We were going to ask him about this. We've been talking with Vince about of course, his conversion, if you will, or his adaptation of a more religious life, always very interesting. And we wanted to see how he did after his first sermon, I guess, or teaching or talking to his congregation. Vince Russo is with us, but we have this story in the news that we want to ask him about. So once again, please welcome Vince Russo. Good morning, Vincent. How are you?
Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Doing pretty well. I don't know if you were listening just before, but did you see this story coming out of Connecticut? This 20-year-old Olympia candidate fell off the uneven bars, fractured his spine, and died.
Yeah, I saw that. What an incredible tragedy that was.
Now, you are a gymnast. What is that? Describe that bar to us. And aren't there more accidents in this sport? We see all the kinds of things. What are the uneven bars?
Well, in men's gymnastics, the parallel bars are two bars that are about 3 feet apart and about 8 feet long, and the gymnast swings between the bars and above them and over them. So that's in men's gymnastics, and those bars are at the same level. In women's gymnastics, the bars are further apart, and one bar is much higher than the other bar. So while men's gymnastics, they exercise along the length of the bars, women's gymnastics, they exercise between the width of the bars. So the women are going kind of perpendicular to the way the bars run. Mm-hmm. And so they'll swing from the higher bar, release, go down to the lower bar and swing back up to the upper bar, etc. There are a lot of injuries in gymnastics, and just like any other sport, when kids are aspiring to be Olympic athletes, they just push these kids to their limits. akin to when you took the puck in the mouth and I kept saying, "Get up, get up." Well, it's in
You would
it's in
remind me of
spades.
that.
It's in spades with this stuff. I mean,
You just
they
made
really do.
Vincent. You just made a lot of people's days to know that I got hit in the mouth with a puck, well, bleeding on the rink, folks. And he goes, "Well, get up, block the next shot, block the next shot." All right.
But Southern Connecticut is a very well-respected gymnastics college. I mean, they've produced a lot of Olympic athletes over the years, and it's a very good program. It's so hard. I mean, when I was in gymnastics, the things that these kids do today were unheard of. I mean, the way
Such as?
they do multiple somersaults with multiple twists, the way they release from one bar, do again multiple somersaults and twists, and catch on the lower bar. It's just amazing what these kids do, and the degree of difficulty is so high. It was not really stated in the article whether the athlete was learning a new
No, they didn't say that. I have the
skill,
piece
or
here.
or if they were practicing a routine that they already had perfected. There are various training aids and devices when you learn a new skill. They'll have a belt on the athlete that's has ropes suspended to pulleys in the ceiling, so that if they miss the skill, they don't plummet to the ground. But that's in training, and you always see somebody will, as good as they are, as top level athletes as these people are, they, someone always misses, and rarely is it this tragic.
Well, that's why.
But it has the potential
What
for
are
it.
the precautions? You said when someone is training, you have the cables attached to the ceiling. That makes sense. You also and you have the pads, but those pads are only a couple of inches thick. And you have so-called
Yeah.
spotters. How much do spotters really matter when someone's spinning around like a top in midair?
Well, they matter a little bit. I mean, a trained spotter can prevent a very serious injury, but there's no way to prevent all of them. And what the way they train, just like any other sport, is they work up to a skill level. So they're not going to try a very, very difficult skill if their basic level of competence is low. They will do skills that are more and more difficult as they train. And this kid was, a top-level athlete, and she was probably doing a skill that was very
She was
difficult.
well muscled, not overly muscled. There's a wonderful photo of her, God bless her, in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And I guess it could happen. And but you must, like, when you were doing this, you must have wiped out a few times, no?
Oh, yeah.
And how
Yeah,
is
I
it
did.
usually? What do you do? Just fall on the mat and get back up and do it again?
Yeah, basically that's the case. But again, when going back to when I was in the sport, the skill level that I had was very low, and so when I wiped out, I wasn't doing something that was incredibly difficult and hazardous. Not the way these athletes are doing, today, and. Just like anything else, you can trip and fall in your driveway.
Well,
and
no,
die,
that's true. I
depending
feel
on
bad
how
for
you
him.
fall.
Well, by the
mean,
way, it benefited you, but folks, I actually, and this is the other half of, yes, I took a puck in the mouth, but I also, when we were kids, taught Vince how to skate because I've been skating since an early age, and the most disconcerting thing about it was because he had been a gymnast, he wouldn't fall. You would bend over like Gumby. Remember that? You would fall.
Well, I was very flexible back then. And
Oh, my goodness.
I wish I had that now. I bend down to pick up something, I drop on the floor, and oh my Lord, it's hard to get up.
I haven't told anybody what it would. Remember when you really got your stride down and you came up and you rung my bell? Let's go up the park. Wait till you see the way I skate now. He neglected to tell me he couldn't stop and almost killed me. Get in the net.
Epic collision.
Epically. We were both lying there like we were dead. All right.
That was a very interesting story about Don Cherry, that I was going to mention. I heard you guys talking about it earlier. It's really kind of a shame. I mean, Cherry was one of these institutions that he was on because people loved to listen to him and people hated to listen to him.
Well, he
And-
bordered on being an a-hole, no question.
Yeah, he did, and people but he brought in listeners. I mean, people
Yeah.
listened either because they loved him or they hated him. And some of his insights I thought, were spot on, and some of them were ridiculous. Athletes not wearing helmets when they play hockey. I mean, it's completely crazy. I thought that his remarks were taking to such an extreme. I thought they could have said to him, "Hey, look, that could be taken as."
I thought they should have suspended him for a month, not fired him completely.
Yeah, I thought it was way over the top. But we're in an atmosphere of hypersensitivity that any little thing is.
Well, what you don't know. We don't watch him every week. We don't know if he was. He may. You know how that is. He may have been losing his fastball too. We don't know. He was 85, and and maybe he.
Yeah, it's possible.
Or he was difficult. It's like when Don Imus got himself in trouble. If Don Imus was a lot nicer to people, he probably would have got suspended and not fired. But as much as I admire Imus, and it was a great influence to what I do here, he was not nice to people. And
no, that's true. But with Cherry, these companies have gotten so sensitive, not to the political issues, because I don't think that they could give a rat's butt about the political issues. They're so afraid that people aren't going to either buy their product or listen to their show or whatever they're selling because they feel, some group feels offended that they take these actions. I mean, I don't think that, I could be wrong, but, they said, we will not tolerate this stuff.
Now, without getting into the names of individuals, we protect people's privacy, but is it not true that your wife was a gymnast as well?
My wife was a gymnast, and that's how we were attracted. I mean, I saw her in those little red leotards, and boy, oh boy,
okay. Now,
that was it for me.
I'm so glad you went there. Inquiring minds want to know. Not me. I'm like like in a seance. What do they call that? I'm the host or whatever.
Medium.
The medium. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. Anyway, yes, I got a call. Hold on. I got a text coming in. Okay. This person calls in. Joe from Queens wants to know, did it enhance your marital life that you both were gymnasts? Hello? No, I'm just wondering, whether what's the so
Well,
Joe's calling. Well, yes, Joe. I'll ask him.
What my brother-in-law, who also was a gymnast, would say, couldn't hide.
All right, let's get now that I've ruined you in the face of God. How did your speech go, or your talk to your congregation? And again, Vince, we've been having Vince on regularly. Of course, we talk politics and other things with him, but again, his long time away from the church as an agnostic, not an atheist, and really when it comes to the organization of religion, not so much doubting a deity. But you gave a talk to the church. It went well, right?
It went very well. As you can tell, I am no stranger to public speaking. I don't mind getting up in front of an audience and
making
speaking.
A fool of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. About various subjects. I had some notes that I was working from, and I thought the message went over very well. I thought the audience was receptive to it. They saw the points that I was making about charitable giving and the benefits to the giver as well as the receiver. So I think it was good. A few folks afterwards came up to me and jokingly said, "Oh, now we know that the pastor can, take a vacation whenever she wants because you can fill in." Well, that's that's hardly
just
the
back
case.
up.
But
no, if you become a pastor, you've got to get a Roman collar.
No,
I do, because I will be at that church. When are you talking again?
Oh, I don't. We have no scheduled.
No,
anything.
because I think I'd like to cover it.
This was
Radio Westchester goes to church.
For now, this was just a one-off event because it coincided with our season of
popular. But by popular demand, Vince is back. Oh, God. Yeah, I think I have to come out. Where is this church? In Kinnelon?
Where is it?
It's up there. Is it like a little church, a big cathedral, a little house? What?
It's not tiny, but it's not St. Patrick's, that's for sure.
Okay.
It's your average small town.
Well,
church.
no, I know that, but some churches have altars, some denominations, some do not. They simply have a pulpit and a cross. What do you guys have?
Well, we have an altar and a pulpit. There's no altar rail the way we used to have in the Catholic Church, because there is no real separation between the celebrant and the congregation.
Well, that's good. Do you realize how archaic an altar is, by the way? I mean, the whole idea of an altar, I mean, I know it's evolved now, but it's, look, we're going to kill somebody and offer it up so you won't be mad at us. I get such a kick
it's
out
funny.
of it. They did it well in South
I-
America. They ate your heart after they killed you on the altar, which was good.
I had asked the
Protein.
pastor about the sanctuary. They had put in an addition on the church many years ago when the congregation was a lot larger, and I asked her about it, and I commented on the pews, and she said, "Oh yeah, we got those pews from some Catholic church in the Midwest that closed or whatever the circumstance was." And I said, that explains why they're so uncomfortable.
Oh, but did they use kneelers in your church?
No.
Okay.
No,
yeah,
there's no.
kneelers.
Fortunately, at my age, there's no kneeling.
Oh. No, I understand. Believe me, I do. You have to.
There's a lot of standing, but there's no kneeling.
Do you know, after I play a hockey game, you'd be interested in the sounds that come from my shoulders. Just like if I lean against the wall, it goes crinkle, crack, bubble.
Oh man, I believe it.
And
You know,
things
like I said earlier, I drop something on the floor. It's easy to get down there to get it. It's not so easy to get back up.
You know what a lot of the listeners will appreciate? It's 8:48. Vincent Russo, our guest. He has many topics. Of course, he'll be moving into other areas now, but we've been getting a nice report from him after his conversion is not the right word, but his finding of a church and actually practicing now and going to church every Sunday after years as a pagan. I can still skate pretty well. Not bad. Shoot the puck okay.
Yeah, and I applaud you. A few years ago, we had a rink here in town that I said, well, let me take a spin around, on it. Oh, wow, what an experience that was.
If my great fear is that something will happen, and if I get hurt and I'm out too long, it'll be hard to get back in shape. But my point was, but I can't open anything. My hands don't do what I want them to do. I can't. Packages, like you buy something, like particularly even as we were setting up the station, some of these electronic things have all that, not even the shrink wrap, but they have this other like crazy, stuff. And I can't open it. I need like a jackhammer to open this stuff up. God,
Yeah,
my hands hurt. My wrist shot has lost its jump. My slap shot's still pretty good. But I have to really force through the hand pain to get a good shot off. God. Well,
Getting old, my friend.
one last question, and then we'll let you go. What chances do you think Michael Bloomberg has to get the nomination?
Wow. You know what? I don't think he's going to.
Oops, I accidentally dropped you. Sorry about
Drop
that.
me on anytime you want.
Who's this?
Joe Soricelli.
I thought so. Joseph, you stay right there. I hit a button I shouldn't have hit. Vince, if you're listening, we're going to go to our next guest. I hit the wrong button, and I'll talk to you soon. All righty, folks. We do have to make a transition here. We're just coming up on 8:50. We thank Vince for his time. You're listening to Radio Westchester, 53 degrees. The rain has begun. It's not very heavy. It's drizzling. But the temperature's already dropped to 43. It's going to drop more precipitously as the day goes forward, and tonight right down into the teens. So please be careful for any ice that may occur. And it is time for our next guest. His show will be streaming it today at 12:30, and then it'll be available for podcast, Aging Issues Radio, and it is the host of that show is the principal at Aging Issues Management, Joe Soricelli. Please welcome Joe Soricelli. Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, Bob.
Sorry to.
This is a pleasure to speak with you early in the morning. We're actually not too early for you.
You may want to take me off the box because you're reverbing in your room. There you go.
I'll take you off the box.
You sound terrific. Anyway, Joseph and I have done radio shows together off and on for the last 2-3 years, maybe 4 even now. Tell us about your practice, and then tell us what your topic's going to be today.
Well, what my practice revolves around is helping people navigate all the issues they face as they age. And interestingly enough, everybody thinks about it as, in quotes, an old age company, but it really isn't. What I did in my 30-some-odd years of financial planning realized that everybody faces different issues at different times in their life. There's a major company out there that actually talks about breaking down life into 8,000-day segments. And it varies from, I'll say this, which I just heard, I think it was Generation Z, which is now the people under the age of 20, that they're actually going to stores because they don't have credit. And a lot of the times they don't have credit is because they have student loans or they've built up, poor credit. So they can't use credit cards online to buy things, so they actually have to go to stores. It was on a news article this morning on a competitor's radio station. But at the same point, that's the first issue. How do I get rid of my student debt? And then you go into, am I going to get married? Am I going to buy a house? How am I going to save for children, budgeting, so forth? And then all of a sudden you start looking at pre-retirement, and you may be worrying about your parents because they're at the later stages in life. So what we do at Aging Issues Management is we try to create a path, a walkway through all the different stages and what you might face at the different stages in life. And then what we hope to do is give you solutions. Can't always solve everybody's problem. When you talk about a budget, sometimes there's just X number of dollars coming in and, Y number of dollars going out. So you may want to do something that unfortunately you can't afford. I actually have a teleconference set up, and I do a lot of them. It's actually going to be a video conference with somebody later today. It is the son of a client that wants to learn about investing. And what they want to do is they've been told we have to generate passive income. But one of the things we always have to talk about is pay your bills first and create an emergency fund. Make sure that you are solvent. And that's the sort of thing that we do at Aging Issues Info, right? We manage all those issues that we face as we age through life. And then, of course, unfortunately, more issues pop up as we get older. This business actually started helping people figure out how to qualify for Medicaid and protect assets while qualifying for Medicaid. And it has morphed into, why don't we address the issues early on so maybe we can enjoy, retirement and understand what the choices are and the issues we'll face and have those resolutions in place.
My guest is Joe Soroselli. Hold on a second. I want to remind people who they're listening to. Joe Soroselli is the principal at Aging Issues Management. His radio show heard once a week here on Radio Westchester, Aging Issues Radio. He has been in practice for quite some time. Joe, one of the things that we were teasing your show earlier today, when we were teasing your hit now.
You're teasing me again.
Was the way you, pardon?
You're teasing me.
I like to tease you, but is the way you break up the approach towards, let's say, the last third of life into several segments, the go-go years, then that period when you're maybe you're doing some traveling and taking it easy, and then the years where maybe you don't have all the abilities that you had physically and maybe even mentally. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, this goes back to, as I said, most people, when they think about aging issues, they think about it in the later stages of life. So what we did was we broke down the retirement years, and I'm going to use the retirement years into at least 3, and then the fourth stage is usually what we call gone, and we talk about the go-go years, the slow-go years, the no-go years, and then gone. But what gone really is?
I don't want to talk about the gone years, if that's okay.
No, we're gonna talk because people have to understand that we all eventually are going to pass away, and we have survivors. So now, if you do the planning and you take care of what you need to do in the early stages of retirement, the survivor has things because one of the things that we, in retirement, we talk about the first stage of retirement. I'm gonna enjoy my life. I'm gonna go on travel. I'm gonna go on trips. I'm gonna enjoy my grandchildren. Well, that's usually based upon a financial plan that has allowed you to accumulate enough wealth, and that allows you to spend money and enjoy that first stage of retirement. And I have to tell you, everybody thinks I'm talking about like, hey, 65. No, I'm talking depending upon your health and the next stages, it could be 80, 60 to 80. It varies. There's no set age limit when you talk about the stages of retirement. But one thing that does definitely take place is physically we're machines. So we start to wear down, and sometimes you have to replace parts, and sometimes you can't do everything you used to do. I spoke with somebody that is in their late 60s that basically said to me, "I play basketball every Saturday, but I can't play at the same level that I used to
Well,
play."
no kidding.
Right? And guess what? He's in his late 60s, right? And he can't play at the same level. And he realizes that maybe, in 10 years, and let's use that phrase, he may not be able to play basketball on Saturday with the 50-year-olds or with the 40-year-olds, or as he said, the 20-year-olds that come onto the court. So you have to start to just, look at life and understand that things are going to change, and we're going to face different issues at different stages. And then when you start moving into that next stage, which we call the slow-go years, a lot has to do with housing. It's everything from, I want to live in a warmer climate to I can't do steps anymore. So you have to start to look at at the housing, and then when you make housing plans in that stage, you do have to think about the next stage where you may need assistance. And why I say that's so important, sometimes people, relocate to areas where they don't have a support network. And what I mean by the support network could be children, could be friends, could be anyone. So you want to try to, think about first, location. I want to be around a support network. Second, you want to, if you relocate, I want to have enough room that if I want somebody to, come in and help me, take care of me, or, give me the assistance that I may need, I want to make sure I have enough room, because most people want to age in place. There's a big industry about these assisted
Why
living
do
facilities.
most people want to age in place? I mean, they got big houses. Don't they want to at least get something smaller when the nest is empty?
Well, you're thinking about just the physical location. Does I don't know anybody that sits down and says, I want to, go to a nursing home and stay in a nursing home. I haven't run into that very often. I do have people that talk about assisted living facilities, and they're popping up all over the place.
Well,
I think
they certainly
we're getting
are.
a glut.
Hey, listen,
right?
it's time for us to go. But before I
Okay.
send you on your way, what will your topic be at 12:30 today?
Well, the 12:30 topic today is to identify the issues that we face. And it's going to be pretty much the 7 common, medical issues that people face and what the effects are. And then from that, we talk about how do we, plan around them.
7 common.
it's a-
Just name one before I send you on your way.
Oh, it's as simple as arthritis.
Okay. Well, let's leave it right there. Let them wonder about the other 6. We'll show you how to tease. Joe Soroselli, he is the the president of Aging Issues Management. They're located right here in New Rochelle. Stay tuned for Aging Issues Radio. Well, not stay tuned. Come back on at 12:30 today. Joe Soroselli will be the host. Thank you very much, Joseph. We'll see you.
You're welcome.
On
See you later.
campus. All righty. We take a very quick break to go over the weather. It is 9 o'clock on the button. It's 43 degrees. It is raining. It hasn't turned into snow yet, but we're told. And we are experiencing a precipitous drop in the temperature. By tonight, folks, it's going to be much colder. But first, the weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. It's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. So the forecast, very cold tonight, getting down to near 18 degrees. Now, the snow that we've been told we will have will likely not stay with us. If it does, it'll stay on the grass, maybe a half inch or so. But it should melt before it freezes, and it will freeze if it's still there come nighttime. We're talking about 18 degrees. They do expect to break a record. The record for this particular day was set. The temperature was set back in 1952. It was 26 degrees. Now tomorrow they say it's going to get even colder. Record cold. They say sunny, breezy, very cold. Highs around 32 during the day. At night, 15 to 25 degrees, depending on wind chill. The actual temperature, 24. And that low was set back in 1986, 23 degrees. So we are challenging that. Now, Thursday, mostly cloudy and not as cold, with highs around 42. And it is Tuesday, and you know then that it is time for our next guest. He is a professor of mass communications and ethics at Iona College. Please welcome once again Professor Jack Breslin. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Bob.
Always good to see you, Professor. This is a perfect time to have you on. 40 years ago, or even so, we had, did Drake fall on the floor? He dropped his phone and everything else. All righty. Back in 73 actually, we had the impeachment, not the impeachment hearings, but the select committee hearings on looking into what happened regarding Watergate, regarding President Richard Nixon. Now we have tomorrow the impeachment hearings from the committee in Congress that could well lead to articles of impeachment being filed. How do you think this is going to be handled? How does it differ from 50 years ago? And how much does the 24-hour news cycle and the very slanted news from all sides now that comes out on cable television, how much will that matter?
Interesting you mention that, because those dates you were talking about, I was up on a holy hill in Suffield, Connecticut, wearing a long black robe and a white collar and rosary beads down to my knees. And I was afraid to talk to pretty girls. Namely, I was in the seminary. Okay. So our access to the media, we had a TV and so forth, but we had a pretty rigorous schedule of the day, starting at 6 o'clock in the morning when the bell rang, and then night prayers at 9:30. And I honestly don't think a lot of guys watched it or were conscious of what was going on. Print media-wise, a copy of the Hartford Courant came in. I don't think most guys read it, or Time magazine. I was pretty religious about that. Religious in the seminary about Time magazine. Careful.
Oh, boy.
You didn't get that one, did you? No.
I did. Really, I got that.
But I think our major source of news was Uncle Walter.
Walter Cronkite.
That in before it was Huntley Brinkley, and then that was in one seminary, and then when you went to the other one, it was Cronkite. That was it. And that's where we got our news from. So how much of the hearings were actually covered on that on the CBS Evening News, I don't remember. But I don't think it would be any more than half of the newscast, because then you'd be accused of, well, that's all you're covering. But I think there was a greater consciousness of what was going on, because the polls, well, how much can we believe those anymore? Just in my little circle, I was at a journalism history conference Thursday to Sunday morning at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, where we were looking at a gymnasium that Trump had a rally in a year before, and the folks there were telling us all about how those unfold. Not once did I hear the word impeachment that entire weekend.
No kidding.
And that's college professors who are in mass communication, media, strategic communication. Not a word was said. I don't think there's really a consciousness of, does it matter? Because the simple fact that the Senate will not convict him. So therefore, I think that a lot of people say, fine, go ahead, do an inquiry. The articles of impeachment will be voted in. It goes to the Senate. But even McConnell Now, I said on another station, I told you the whole story about how I met, in quotation marks, Mitch McConnell in my America's Most Wanted days. John Walsh was testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee with Joe Biden as the chair about a bill that would allow free background checks for nonprofit agencies, particularly because of the possibility of pedophiles and folks that you didn't want around children being hired. The principal attraction that day was Oprah Winfrey. And she drew a lot of attention to the issue, and that was great. Now, meanwhile, and the bill did pass because in the House they stalled a little bit, and she basically, from what I'm told, called up and said, you guys better get your act together, else I'm going to do a show. And, of course, there was a signing at the White House, and, Bush II was there, and Oprah signed it. And, once again, she used her platform for a great good.
Okay.
McConnell. He was the one who brought her in. Now, he was not, he was a junior member of the committee at the time. You could tell from his office this guy was ambitious. Now, this was 92, early 92, fall 92, I think. And we went into his office early because Walsh was meeting with McConnell, and Thompson, the former governor of Illinois, was Oprah's advisor. And it was kind of funny. As you came in, Oprah comes walking into the building, and the camera crews come running. And, oh, good morning, everyone. And then she goes into the inner sanctum. Meanwhile, we... This is what happens when you have me on this long. We had a mic on Walsh. And...
Would you have a lavalier on him? A little?
Yeah,
Okay.
We had a mic on Walsh. And his McConnell's press secretary comes over to us and says, oh, does Walsh have a mic on? Of course, we lied. And so we got to hear what was said in the inner sanctum. And it was kind of interesting that, Walsh kind of
I would have figured it was just banal
conversation
stuff. How are you?
Well, no, but their strategy was for the hearing, how Oprah should address this issue. And what are the hot button issues and stuff for it? So Oprah just kind of sat back and listened most of the time. Walsh tried to take over. But McConnell was very domineering, even though this wasn't necessarily his issue. This was his office. He was in charge. Now, of course, go back a few minutes. My crew and I were standing in the office. Now, his press secretary said, well, why don't you just go and wait in the senator's office? Because he wasn't there. He comes in, the aide comes in, he goes, oh, the senator's here. So we go out. He did not even look at us. We were vermin on the ground. What is this vermin doing in my office?
Oh,
McConnell never said hello to us. We were the only people in the office besides the press secretary and Walsh. Never said a word to us. Now, of course, being the wise guy that I am, I felt like saying, oh, I'm from Lexington, I'm from Louisville or something like that, and watch him, oh, really? What family? And didn't say a word. And the crew and I just stand there. Oprah was very friendly to us. Oh, hi, how are you? I love the show, that kind of thing. She was very pleasant. And then I met her later when we had an actual Oprah show in Chicago at Harpo, where we caught a bad guy because of us getting on that show. So she was very pleasant. But him, I was just so appalled that someone who represented people from a state and was obviously climbing the Senate ladder could be just so patrician.
Were you surprised?
No, because Biden was friendly. Of course, we were with Walsh, but there were other times where I was on the Hill for some stuff. We had a Halloween party in the Senate chambers outside of the Senate for the senators, their grandchildren, their kids, because the children's TV bill was up. So with Fox, we don't take you to lunch. We have a Halloween party for your kids where we had all of the Fox cartoon characters dressed up. and one of them was Killer Tomato.
Okay.
And I got a picture of Killer Tomato and Teddy Kennedy in People magazine.
But
Get it? Teddy Kennedy, Killer Tomato?
I get it.
Okay,
I
fine.
get it.
A little slow this morning. Fine.
No. I'm taking you
by
seriously.
accident. I
Killer
did it by
Tomato.
accident
Did you
because it
get
could've
to
been
meet
Captain
him?
Hook.
He's supposed to be
Yes,
friendly. Ted
because a
Kennedy
lot
was
of people
supposed
weren't there yet. He and Leahy were there, and they were very friendly. I had to get a soundbite, about the Children's Act and so forth. And Kennedy gave me a nice little soundbite about Fox Kids Club and Fox Children's Network. A great addition to Saturday Morning Children's Network. So there they were. They're human beings. They were friendly.
Mm-hmm.
But McConnell, this man has already defied the Constitution with what he did with Kavanaugh. So he has hinted that if there's an article of impeachment, it goes to them. They will just say, no, we don't see any reason to try him. Again, a gross violation of the U.S. Constitution. Although other people would argue, no, they don't have to try him if they don't want to. So with that attitude, as I say in class, my point, I do have one.
There is a point here.
Exactly. And of course, if you were in class, you'd be looking at your phone to see what time it is, and the president gets to the point eventually. That people think and I'm not saying 100%, people think that if he's not going to be tried and he's not going to be convicted, why should we care? Even though the evidence is slowly creeping up that, yes, a high crime or misdemeanor was.
Well, you know what the
committed,
real issue with
this man should be removed from
No,
office.
but isn't it true though, and then we'll get into the actual coverage of it. But isn't it true? And our guest is Professor Jack Breslin, professor of mass communications and ethics at Iona College, that the way the Constitution is set up, the founding fathers left this synapse, if you will, this gap, where at the end of the day, there is no set rule on what will constitute removal from office. The precedent will be set by someday when the Senate votes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so if they don't vote, it's totally within their, and I don't know that I agree with it, but it's totally within their right to say this does not reach that threshold because no one's ever said it.
Exactly. And they could say we're not going to try him.
Right. So, but I think they should try him nonetheless. But at first, McConnell said he would, but then we see that we see two sides coming out of the White House every day. Last week, the president said, I want this out in the open. And the next day he said, I don't want a public hearing. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, he wants to go and face his accusers.
He wants to bully his accusers.
Yeah, that's the exact word. Thank you. I was looking for that little verb there.
Mm-hmm.
That he wants the platform. He wants, even though his base might not be in the room, he still loves the camera. He still loves the limelight. I'm not inside of his mind, and I don't want to be, but he loves any kind of attention he can get. And so therefore, even if it's going and testifying at a hearing or confronting his accusers, he's like, bring it on. He loves that moment without realizing the long-term consequences here. Now, one of the reasons they might try him in the Senate is because when these Republican senators are up for re-election, a lot of them have a very strong base to assure that re-election, but there's always that unpersuaded. There's always the undecideds that could impact them returning to that seat that they are judging him from.
Now, your take on it is that people aren't going to pay attention because McConnell said he may not bring it to a vote anyway. But I think because I remember during the Iran-Contra hearings, which at first I didn't care about, but once you start hearing testimony, it begins to rivet you.
Oh, yeah. I was on the road with my good buddy Chuck Connors, and we were doing a publicity tour. And again, print media was very dominant. And I remember looking at USA Today when we were on the Amtrak train and having fun. Oh, here's a chart of Ali's medals and this kind of stuff. But as soon as we got to the hotels, Connors would turn on the hearings, and he wanted to watch it. And, I was interested too. And one of our stops was Washington, D.C., and that was, the obsession of the town at the time. As soon as you got into Union Station, you could hear people talking about it.
Well, I remember Watergate, and it was one of the things that increased. I already loved politics, but it increased my love of it a great deal because going back to that time, I was already working on Wall Street in the communications role at the time. And so I would get the Times every day and read it cover to cover, and I'd be up till 2 in the morning watching the hearings. But what was different then is we were just coming out of the era. I'm one of the few people I admire the greatest generation. They were also the most naive generation. They believed everything the government told them. And the 70s and 80s, they actually bought junky cars because they were American. It was interesting. But at any rate, it was during that period when we realized the government lied to us all the time, that half of Vietnam was a hoax, et cetera, et cetera. But what was interesting in not having 24-hour news services, we'd never heard what went on behind the scenes before. It just didn't happen. So to hear the testimony, which we read every day in the papers now, was riveting, number one. But number two, there was a totality of information that began to make sense. Like the guy who was credible from the minute he opened his mouth was Dean. Totally credible. They never disproved one thing he said. And it was pretty clear that the president's men were just trying to besmirch him every chance they got. But it was riveting. Will that happen now?
One of the advantages of the 24-hour news cycle in the forum, the marketplace of ideas, is you have a lot of different viewpoints that you might not necessarily have gotten. That, as you said, you just had the one medium showing you the hearings live.
You have a
But
lot of
this
false
time,
narratives now.
Yeah, now you're going to have multiple platforms in order to introduce this and interpret it. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that, and the times that, as you say, some of the narratives will be false. They will be biased. There's others that will be true, and commentators trying to walk the middle line. But I think that the availability of these hearings outside, the asynchronous versus the synchronous medium, before you had to tune it in at a certain time, unless, of course, they replayed them at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, where, very few people were watching. But now you have the ability to see it on your phone, get it on your laptop, watch it live on TV. There are so many different platforms that you can watch it on, and you don't have to tune in exactly when it's happening.
Well, I got to tell you, but for those of us in the news that have read all the transcripts already, there's going to be nothing new or bombshell that comes out of this. But for the average person, there likely is. Mm-hmm. And now, are you aware, I just want to take a sidebar, and then we'll get back to the hearings, what's going on with Mr. Napolitano on Fox News. He is saying that he believes the president should be impeached. Actually, he's almost to the point where he believes he should be removed from office. He's a libertarian. He's been a pro-Trump guy until now. But the people he's fighting with, and again, being on Fox, they're starting to marginalize him already. Now, while I would hold my nose in general, I accepted the fact that Fox supported the president. But when your three primetime people are Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, and Laura Ingraham, that to me is an egregious journalistic crime, and for lack of a better word. How can you have all three that don't even have an acquaintance with the truth?
Back to when O'Reilly was on the air, and Hannity the same thing. Are they journalists or are they entertainers? And that's one point. But on the other hand,
Anglin clearly is.
I have to admit that I cannot take more than 5 minutes of Fox News. I will try to flip back and forth between CNN, NBC, and MSNBC, and Fox News, and some of the other local cable that's available in my news hound habit. But I just cannot sit there and listen to them. And they'll say, "Oh, Breslin, you're liberal and stuff." No, I think I'm middle of the road, as you would say, although there was a state senator upstate, Chuck Schumerhorn, who used, not Chuck Schumer, no, Ed, I forget his first name, Schumerhorn. He used to say, the only thing in the middle of the road is a dead dog. Well, I don't know about that.
You know what? That's
There's
bullshit.
Yeah, there's some issues that you might be considered conservative and others liberal. One time in class at Minnesota, a student just busted out, well, you're always siding with the media. And I go, well, that's kind of funny because my media colleagues are telling me that I'm going on the other side. I'm bashing the media too much. So I don't think that, you could tag me necessarily as liberal or conservative. But on the other hand, I try to have an open mind. As a professor, you have to have that open mind. You have to be able to draw out ideas. You have to offer that forum that students are comfortable expressing their ideas.
Well, what about the businessmen and women that run Fox News? Don't they realize that that they're almost at the point of being a laughing stock, that they're criticized in almost every quarter?
One word there, ka-ching, that I would say they're making a heck of a lot of money on the advertising in that particular demographic.
Because they have a targeted demographic.
Yeah, because their demographic might be older, but it's a wealthier, higher educated audience that might necessarily be interested in that particular perspective. Because in talking to folks who believe every word that is said on that cable outlet, there's no convincing them that it's not. There's no convincing them it's slanted. Even though one of my colleagues, Mitch Bard, did a couple of studies about Fox News, one of them being the death panels and Sarah Palin, about, just the absolute bias and in some cases absolute falsehood. That another study a colleague of mine did was for a period of time, she kept track of the talking heads. Usually it's 3-1. Sometimes it's 4-0, where they just have that conservative pro-Trump side. And as you were saying, I just don't see that as a objective. Of course, that's not the word for it, but a viable newscast
well, the
that
problem
you're just
is
giving your
some
own
of this
opinion.
stuff, like I tuned in one day and they were saying stuff that was totally ridiculous. Like this was a deep state conspiracy it's that Obama was in league with certain Muslims to do this. It's just incredible stuff. Anyway, I guess it is just about the ka-ching, but there is something else going on. It affects Democrats and Republicans alike. We have, people talk about partisanship and they forget what is behind the partisanship. It has always been a part of the American culture, and for those of us who are sports fans going back to Vince Lombardi, that the only thing that matters is winning. And it has become a toxic feature of American life. And so, because it's the only way I can justify what some of the Republicans are doing now and the Democrats before them, which is it only matters if we win. I mean, this guy, who is this one guy, Jim Jordan? Does he even care to be objective? Does he even try? I mean, I'm sure he goes, and I'm trying to put myself in his place. My job is to discredit that guy. That's all I know. I got to say things about him. And the Democrats would do the same thing, lest anyone think I'm only picking on one side. If we've evolved to all that matters is winning, democracy's lost.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you say, the Democrats do that too. In listening to Rachel Maddow or to Anderson Cooper or Walt Blitzer, do they have a bias? Now, there have been studies about them too. And when
they have a bias, but I never hear them making anything up. I have to be honest.
Right. So when Maddow is doing her show there, you see that she has done extensive research, even the other night on Colbert, that she's not a fan of Trump, but I don't think she consciously makes anything up in order to bolster her side of the argument.
But she looks for the things that support her argument. She cherry picks. Some of our callers cherry pick.
Of course. But on the other hand, I don't think that she makes anything up in order to. But on the other side, I'm just wondering about some of the statements that are made.
Like why would I just despise her down in a very visible Laura Ingham for ruining my profession. But why would Laura say things like this guy's loyalties were the officer, the colonel, the patriot, the soldier, who simply reported what he heard, and she goes out carrying water and says that the guy is actually Ukrainian, who cares more about the Ukraine than the United States. Why would she do that? Why would she say that?
It goes back to when Limbaugh lost some advertisers because of what he said about a Georgetown student when she went before Congress
Yeah,
to
I remember
testify about the reproductive health care for reproductive. I'm losing my words there, but he called her all kind of nasty words. From the legal side, could she have sued him? Absolutely. But she would have had to prove actual malice, knowing reckless falsehood, because she was a voluntary public figure there, that she had appeared before that Senate hearing or House hearing, even though for a limited time she was a public figure. That's a very difficult standard to do, and in order to do that, she would have to go into her private life to prove that she was not what he said she was. But the fact that someone sitting in his mansion in Florida in front of his golden microphone would say something like that was just so appalling. But that's what happens. They get this false sense of importance, and that they can say whatever they want and make up anything they want in order to support their point of view.
But every once in a while, an apology would be nice. I remember I said something today I wish I didn't say, and just sometimes things come out of your mouth. But why not an apology? Why not some sort of a, hey, that was a little ridiculous that I said that. Why not?
That's not
That's
something
real. That's human.
That's not a part of their consciousness. In ethics, we talk about the rational process of deciding what is right and wrong, and a lot of that is based on your morals. But there are people that we would consider amoral, that they don't have any morals. Well, is morals always right? When you talk about a value that influences one's ethical decisions, there is virtues and there are vices. And so there are times where someone will lie and not realize they're lying because it's just such a part of their narrative.
Such a reaction.
Yeah,
sure.
that truth is not a value to them. Deception is the value. And so when they open their mouths, there's no concept of, no, what you're saying is wrong. What you're saying is hurting someone. That is not part of their ethical decision-making process.
Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll share the weather with you and who's sponsoring the bottom half of the hour. When we come back, we will continue with Professor Breslin, Mass Communications and Ethics. I want to get a sense from him of what his students are thinking, what generation, I guess Z, and maybe they're Y, X, Y, Z, or maybe they're A all over again when we come back. This is Radio Westchester Mornings with Bob Marrone. We're in our long-form interview segment. All righty, the temperature's dropping as was forecast. Let's go to the weather right now. The weather is brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. It's already dropped to 39, and we see on our cameras up north some snow has already begun. The rain is here, the weather's cold, but here in the Sound Shore we do not have any snow yet. But what we are looking at is the high of 53 has already been reached. The temperatures will continue to drop into the evening. And we're going to get down to like 18 degrees tonight, and it's going to feel like single digits to near zero with the wind out of the northwest, 15 to 30 miles an hour. Multiple layers are needed, and if you're going to stay warm, they do expect a record low tonight. It used to be 26, and that was set all the way back in 1952. Tomorrow, more of the same. Record cold, sunny, breezy, very cold. Highs around 32. Winds out of the northwest, 10 to 20 miles an hour. It'll feel like 15 to 25 degrees. Tomorrow night, partly to mostly sunny, mostly cloudy, rather. Still very cold, but not as harsh as Tuesday night. Lows around 24. And that particular record, the Wednesday record for this date, 23. So we will kiss that record and maybe even break it. Back in 1986. Thursday, mostly cloudy, not as cold, with highs around 42. Thursday night, partly cloudy with lows around 32. This half hour is brought to you by our friends at United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhtc.com. Aging Issues Management, today at 12:30. Their new radio show, Aging Issues, will be Aging Issues Radio. They'll be with you at 12:30 to 1 o'clock. The law firm of Pena and Con, Dominic Cigars, located right here in Larchmont on Boston Post Road, and Plug-in Virtual Reality. We go back now to our conversation with the doctor, of course, Professor James Breslin. Jack, welcome back. You like James, huh? How do your students feel about all this? Do they realize that a lot of this is unprecedented, that it's probably, I mean, I realize back in the days of yellow journalism, there was probably a lot of false narratives, but you can tell me if that's true. But the false narratives out there now are almost mind-boggling.
There is a portion that does follow this rather closely. There are others who might tune in once in a while, and it's difficult for people to, not just my students, to understand just what are the parameters here and what does this mean. There are others who, are not following it at all because they might not feel that they can make a difference on this, that yes, it's going to affect them, but they have no control over it. One of my colleagues, David Mindich, wrote a book a few years ago, Why People Under 40 Don't Follow the News. And his thesis was that people don't follow the news because, as I just said, they don't feel that they can make any kind of difference, even though how many votes was the Palm Beach recount decided by. There's an election upstate in my beloved Ulster County where, when I last heard, for the district attorney election was by single digits. They said election night was 3 votes. I don't know what's happened since then. But to say that one's vote doesn't count, well, it does. Now, meanwhile, because of the complexity of the issue, there's times where people will, or students will bring it up in class, and I am the moderator. I don't insert my opinion necessarily. I don't say you're wrong or you're right. I try to just offer that forum. But there are times, even though it's not a political science or a constitutional law class, it's a media class, that I have to say, that's great, but if I could just offer this little note that, what you said was wrong, and correct, this idea that, if he gets impeached, he's out of office. Well, no, that's not true, and I just politely explain
They don't understand that.
But I also get this sense that, like other people, older or younger than them, they're a bit frightened by this.
They should be.
What is going on here, and especially the ones who voted for them. I don't know that they're turning around and realizing, there's just something happening. But
do they realize that the president calling people scum, shithole countries, which I can say on this venue, and things like that, do they realize that that is a huge departure from statesman-like conduct, or not?
There are some that do, yes, and there's some who don't. In one particular class last fall, I had a student that was a strong Trump supporter, shall we say. And I welcome participation in class. And almost every time I brought something up, his hand would go up in the back, and he would, fashion the answer to make some kind of pro-Trump statement. Mm-hmm. And after a while, I realized some students were very turned off by that. They didn't want to take him on because he seemed to have his answers in place. So there were times where he said stuff that, he got from a source that just was not accurate.
Like the Daily Caller or something like that?
Yeah, well, I don't know where he got his information from, but he would proclaim make these statements about, Trump being the greatest president who ever lived and stuff. And I'm not gonna debate him. But on the other hand, you got to stick to the topic. But there's a lady in South Africa, Cape Town, Jess Hurst, who runs a group called the Justice Desk. Mm-hmm. And we've gone over there for an immersion experience with our alums a couple of times. And Jess came last year to give one of our principal talks. And and really wowed the students. She really gave a fabulous talk and really motivated, I hope, and showed them what one person could do to make a difference. Well, before the class, myself and some of the other folks who were hosting said, "Now, come on, you can't get up there and bash Trump. If you do, you're going to turn off a lot of folks who are listening to you." Okay, fine. Well, in the big talk, she didn't. But in my class, sure enough, within seconds, from the back of the room, okay, and I'm like, well, let's stick to the issues here. She goes, "No, this is important." And I asked her, don't do this. But she wanted to hear. That was one of the reasons that she came, was to hear what people were saying about him and why. She wanted to listen, to both sides of the argument. And afterwards, we were walking back up towards the brother's house where she was staying, and she's just like, "I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't." And I went, "Yeah, well, I told you what was going on today." And she goes, "But some things that he said were just absolutely wrong. I mean, even though I'm in Cape Town, I know, a couple of statements this young gentleman said were wrong." And I said, "Well, yeah." She goes, "Why didn't you correct him?" And I said, "Well, you haven't been here for 6 weeks."
Yeah, so there you go. But it's troubling. Now, let's talk about newsrooms. The New York Times gets a lot of heat. Trump uses all these modifiers, the failing Times, little Joe, little this, little Nico. But in the newsrooms of a place like the Times, which has a great reputation, but clearly has its biases as well, which I think for the most part are confined to the editorial pages where they belong. But still, what is it like in these newsrooms where they're trying to tell the truth, and then they hear that the President of the United States is calling it fake news? And I'm sure in other publications that it's the opposite as well. They just simply, they don't call it fake news. They just say the press is out to get me. Clinton used to say that all the time. So did Obama. What's it like in these newsrooms? Are they offended by that? Does it energize them?
Well, I don't work in one of those newsrooms, so I don't know. But in talking to my colleagues from various little adventures I've had, I still keep in touch with folks.
Yeah, I know you do.
I have friends, hard to believe, but I do, that they just feel so bombarded that they just feel they still love what they do. But there is this cloud over their heads that they have to be so careful about crossing over a certain line that it might seem biased, or in checking a story, it's double checking, triple checking to make sure that it's not being fed to them by someone who has a bias and is giving them a fake story. So it is a time that has been more challenging than ever for these journalists to be doing their job and try to do it in an unbiased fashion. I read Katie Tur's book a while ago, and I try to put myself in her place of just being called out by this political candidate in the middle of a speech, or just being mocked to her face. I never experienced anything like that. And, I have to admire her and the other folks that have to put up with this in a public forum.
There's been a parallel, and I know I'm a little older than you, and it kills me, but I am. In the 60s, there were a lot of false narratives coming out of the left. And they used to have, and I have to be very careful how I word this, like there'd be these shows on, like WBAI, for example. Bless it. I love that radio station because anybody can say anything, but they did. And you get these
like the
people,
George Carlin monologue.
Well, yeah, but that I didn't mind. But still, they'd have somebody
the
on.
Supreme Court
They'd have people on who would be, "We're here to represent the Supreme Council and the ecumenical union of those against the repressive," and it was all this bull spit coming out of them. And they would get some guy that shot 2 cops because he was a member of the ecumenical group to save all peoples from the ecumenical nationalistic bull spit nonsense garbage. And I didn't think we'd live through this again. And now here we are getting the same kind of nonsense from the right. I guess it's a part of free speech, but it really bothers me. Maybe I got to get out of the bed. It bothers the hell. It bothered me then, the garbage from the left, and it bothers me now, the garbage from the right. No truer movie was ever put together than Network, because they captured it then. And I
Right. I use little pieces of that in ethics, media ethics class, that I want to give them hypothetical yet realistic examples of ethical dilemmas in the media, and that's one that I utilize a lot. But as you're saying, some of that stuff, I was having flashbacks to my days at the Little Daily Freeman when I was the city reporter. And then later, I freelanced for a little weekly called the Post-Star up there. And I started getting a little bit of a following. Not that I deserved it. But the people who would call you up to suggest stories or just come into the newsroom, in the door of the Daily Freeman, just come walking in and say, I want to see Jack Breslin. And the reception was just point, over there. And they would come, and they wouldn't walk away. They would just stand at my desk and just haranguing until finally the editor or somebody said, okay, he's busy. He's
What would
got
they
work to
harangue?
do.
What would they want to yell
About
at you
their
about?
particular point of view. They didn't like something you wrote about the mayor or I didn't cover the county, but occasionally on a Saturday or something, you were the only reporter. You had to do a quickie story, and you had to get something from the chairman of the county legislature, and that was a Republican, and they didn't like what you did. Even with the Post-Star, there was a story where Pataki had come down to Kingston, wasn't even in office 6 weeks, and had this plan of turning all of the old IBM buildings in Kingston and Fishkill and Binghamton into this state computer center. Now, of course, my namesake up in Albany, Michael Breslin, the supervisor, said, no, it ain't going to happen. But they did this. It was a dog and pony show in plain English. Even his people were saying, we don't have to get legislative approval. Where are you going to get the money from to do this? And so it was just a show. And there, the local the Freeman did this big front page thing, Pataki's Potion. Now, I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I went and did my homework. Now, I didn't know my namesake was the supervisor up there. But when I called, 1 second, Mr. Breslin will talk to you. I go, oh, hi. Must be cousins from someplace. But the whole background that he gave me that they didn't say anything about. And then the reaction that I got, I had a listed number. And the reaction I got from people who thought, I was disrespectful to the governor because during the press conference I challenged, I did a follow-up question that they didn't like. And the county legislative chairman, Jack, be respectful to, the governor, that kind of stuff. Well, what they were saying was wrong, and it never happened. It got a lot of people's hopes up that, we're going to turn this into. But at the same time, there's development there in that plant. But the whole press conference was just a joke. And, for me and others challenge it.
I had that. I challenged the guy.
But then the people calling up and confronting me and then going to the Post-Star saying, I want to talk to this guy. It was just, I wrote what they said.
It's awkward when people have talking points. If you recall, 2 years ago now, we had the death of a student after we had the death of a student here in Rochelle, a stabbing. And in part of the PR part, they hired this educator out of Baltimore who was going to come in and figure out how we could deal with violence. So they set up one of these press conferences on the phone. So we're all in a room over at the school, and So he said, we're putting together a task force to deal with the problem. I said, oh, okay. I said, tell me, because they're coming out of corporate America, I ran many a task force. I said, you're running a task force, you're going to come up with a plan, correct? He said, yes. I said, well, have you identified the problem yet? There is no problem. I said, well, if there's no problem, why do you put it together? Well, there is no problem. The only issue that we see, there are those people that are not getting every benefit. What does this have to do with the murder of a kid? And he was so politically correct as to just totally blow the press conference. And I said, I can't talk to you anymore. I'm not going to bother talking with you anymore, because he was trying to spin me. And, if you're going to spin me, and I don't know if, I'm sure you dealt with this as a reporter too, have enough respect to spin me well. It's one of the reasons I don't like Kellyanne Conway and sometimes the way the president handles himself, because they just want me to look into black and call it white, and I won't do it. And I said, but you can't have a problem. You can't fix a problem you can't identify. Why? What are you trying to do? Those are the heartbreaking moments when you're out on the stump.
Yeah, particularly when you deal with someone at Conway who's not really interested in what you have to say. She's just there as a puppet for him and will just make a joke out of anything. Going back to the beginning when, go back and go out and buy some of Ivanka's clothes and that kind of thing. That she just, there was one time where I think she was talking to Cooper or somebody.
Kellyanne?
Yeah. That was just...
I don't know why bothers having her on.
It was a joke that she just was not answering any kind of questions and was ducking every single thing. Now, having been on the other side as a PR guy...
Well, that's why I went there.
Right. That occasionally it'll come up in class about the spin doctor. And the lying by omission.
But there's a good spin doctor too. Pardon me for cutting you off. You know what I thought this guy should have said to me, and I would have had to take it. Well, we're still at the stage where we're identifying exactly what the issues are, Bob. But he didn't say that. He just said there is no problem. Oh no, there's a girl dead. There's no problem. You were hired with the express purpose of helping us deal with violence in the school, not just dealing with the image of the school because of the violence. Mm-hmm. And the expression I used to use was, I realize that you're going to give me a dance and a spin. Have enough respect for me to do it well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were times where in the beginning of America's Most Wanted, for example, we were getting a lot of media attention. And I always had already been doing it for a few years, but I was always amazed how easy it was to spin it, even when major media came, and just, hand them the nice plate and they ate off it, and that was fine. Now, occasionally there was something negative because somebody had leaked something, and you just went and addressed that. But one of the issues, for example, that came out later on, and we managed to put out the fire rather quickly, was actors or people who looked like the suspects being arrested or detained. Now, in my little press briefing, when somebody came, did I hand them a press release and say, "Oh, by the way, we have this little problem here, and here's our response to it"? No, I waited to if they found it. Well, then I talked to them about it. I had my little statement. But on the other hand, I spun it. That we are a show that makes a difference. We're not only catching the bad guys, but we are also helping the victims. And here is our host, John Walsh, America's victim, America's grieving father, who's seeking justice. And it worked like a charm.
Really did, didn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back to your students for a little bit. When you explain to them, or the persons in your team of communicating professors explains to them how to check a story and double check a story and make sure you get it right, what is their response to that? Did they know that this went on?
All right. First of all, I don't teach those courses.
No, but you understand that.
Yes, but occasionally I will do a journalism type course where I'll start off with the old cliche that if your mother says she loves you, get a second source. Mm-hmm. And so in verifying information, I try to stress to them, you have to be so careful with who you are checking the information with, mm-hmm. that you might have a relationship with someone that you trust, but you don't realize that this person has an agenda, mm-hmm. and in some cases is playing you, and you don't even know it. So you have to try to find those factual sources that do not have the bias, or you check 2 or 3 different perspectives and arrive at what you consider to be the truth, that from verifying the information, this is the factual side of it. Now, when you are dealing with something that is more subjective, well, then you have to give both sides of the story. The nicest compliment I got one time was from my 7th grade guidance counselor, who said to me, I love reading your stories because you just put both sides. You say this is what one side says, this is what other side says, and then leave it up to the reader to make up their mind.
Yeah, but the facts are in there as well.
Oh, they certainly were.
Okay.
And the time that the mayor got up at a budget hearing, and this woman actually had a story that had appeared in the paper hours before, and I had spoken to him on the phone, and after that, I taped everything he said on the phone, that he said, "Oh, no, that story's not accurate." And I went, I'm sitting there going, huh? And people turn around and look at me. And
Well,
I'm
that's like the "it's a hoax" line by the president.
I keep a smile. And then later I said, how dare you say that? Well, you know how the game is played, Jack. Well, but I'll make it up to you.
No,
buddy.
but you
That
see,
kind of
that's the
crap.
point. How the game is played. That's what they're doing in Washington.
Exactly.
It's,
So
it's
to
all a
him-
game. We're just subject to their game.
And I was there as the beat reporter for the Freeman. There would be somebody else there the next year. And of course, there was. I can't.
One more item, and you'll probably react to this strongly. I think it was Instagram, but don't hold me to it. Came out the other day and said, no, we are not going to preclude political advertising and fact-check political advertising. Now, you've often said in these airwaves and other airwaves that I've been on that, well, more is better. How can you possibly police that?
That's the problem. Just the other day, in the Times, there was an obituary for the reporter who originally broke the story in Montgomery, Alabama, about the famous New York Times versus Sullivan ad, He Their Rising Voices. And in that ad, there were mistakes, but there were minor mistakes. And when the court was considering that, they said, well, it wasn't knowing reckless falsehood. They didn't make it up. They were not reckless with regards to whether it was true or false. So the problem is when you face that kind of a situation, you have to sit down and say, well, who is the source? And you know, do I believe it? But when you are dealing with this crazy new medium, that, as I tell the students in class, the law is behind the technology. By the time we come up with some kind of legal remedy, there is a new technology out there that has made it outdated. And so confronting this whole idea of just totally fabricated political advertising, before there was another remedy for this, that if you handed it to a print newspaper or a radio station or television station, they would just say, no, we're not going to run this. But today, as you said, there is so much of it out there, and the problem of trying to police social media is very difficult, if not possible.
Yeah, it just seems impossible to me. Where do you think we're headed with that?
I hope there is a remedy someplace, and so that people, we welcome them to the marketplace of ideas, but just do not knowingly lie. But we've been having that ever since, the first time they put up a handbill in the Roman Forum.
Really?
Well, I wasn't there, but that's what I hear. Yeah.
No. Well, some people say I was. So, before we send you on your way, how do you think the hearings will go?
Stay tuned. This is going to be fun.
All right, Dr. Breslin, thank you very much. Jack Breslin, Media Law and Ethics Professor at Iona College. Thanks a lot, Doctor. Thanks for
My
being
pleasure.
with us today. We're going to wrap things up here, cover a few issues for you. First up, let's look at tomorrow. We've got a busy schedule tomorrow. We will be talking about Jeannie Zaino, and we'll be talking with Jeannie Zaino, Professor of Political Science, Presidential Historian at Iona. We'll be talking with her tomorrow. We're going to talk with Harlan Ullman. Also, we will be inviting in, let me see. Yes, we have, not Vince Russo, I've got the wrong note that I'm looking at. We'll be talking with Al Tarantino from District 4 or 2 here in New Rochelle, Ivar Hayden from District 4. He's the guy from District 4. And we're going to talk with a man by the name of Brian Howard. He runs yet another Westchester news service. Let's take another look at the weather. It's getting foggy in here because the temperature's dropping quickly and it's warm in here. Right now it's 39 degrees, raining across Westchester, raining across the Sound, so we've got some snow up county. I want to thank our guests today, Mike Edelman, Bob Cox, Vince Russo, of course, Dr. Breslin, and where's my list? Who else? Who did I miss? Oh, so many different people. So many people, so many guests. We're going to go, and we will be back with you tomorrow from 6 to 10. This is Radio Westchester. I'm Bob Marrone for Jake Schaefer, Dr. Breslin et al. We'll see you tomorrow.